Good morning to everyone joining us here today. Whether you're sitting in this room with us or watching this on your device from somewhere else on this earth, I'm grateful to you all the same. Whether you're a panelist in one of our segments or a member of the audience, your participation, your expertise, and your experiences matter all the same. I am amazed and honored to stand here today and welcome you all to Intersecting Voices, an event on queer and disability rights, organized by Atypical Dikkatein and the Red Door in collaboration with Oxfam, Asia Center, and queerbeat as their media partners. This has been in the making for many months, and while you'll only see a select few on the stage today, know that there are many more to acknowledge. I joined Civic Asia and Atypical Dikkatein Youth Network as a youth mobilization associate around 4 months ago. The brief I received for today's event was clear. This isn't just an event, it's our attempt at creating a community space, one that we aim to sustain for weeks, months, and years to come. And importantly, one that we want all of you to be equal partners in. What you will witness here today is just the beginning, and we sincerely hope that you'll help us take it to greater heights above and beyond. Now, let's dive into a brief rundown of today's flow and agenda. We have curated a diverse range of experiences, each designed to explore the depths and intersections of queer and disability rights, starting with messages from Oxfam and the Red Door, followed by a panel discussion on intersectional advocacy. Then we'll break for tea and snacks, followed by a youth led roundtable on intersectional young Indians. And we'll wrap up by summarizing the closing remarks. And now it's my pleasure to call upon someone who prefers the backstage to the spotlight, who saw the script and said, Shifali, can you please tone down my introduction? The answer is no. Please give a big round of applause for Soumya Mishra, an Oxfam Fellow whose dedication to this cause has been nothing short of remarkable, and without whom we would not be here today. Let's welcome Soumya to share a few words about the journey we are embarking on together.
Hi everyone. Thanks for making it today. Lovely to have all of you. It's like almost 1 year ago we released the trailer of Atypical Dikkatein and it's come like a whole circle. So thank you everyone. It's been an amazing journey. It started from burnout, exhaustion, loneliness, and wow, we had like 100 registrations for this, and even like till today morning, people were asking, are there cancellations? Because we had limited capacity. But thank you so much for making it here. And I'll give a short introduction. What is Civic Asia actually? So, when I got into Oxfam Fellowship, they told me that they're building a platform called Civic Asia to amplify youth voices. So, how I and we within Atypical Dikkate see it as like an umbrella, so where we are trying to bring in other young people who are doing different kinds of work so we can collaborate and amplify those initiatives, because I don't feel we can achieve what we want to achieve, collective liberation fighting in silos. So this is a small attempt towards that. I know all of you are doing amazing work, so I hope this creates a space for collaboration, networking, and we can think how can we navigate this and advocate for our rights. But yeah, that's a small brief and I won't take a lot of time. And we have a short message from Oxfam. Mustafa Talpur has sent a short message. Can we just play it?
I'm very pleased to meet with you and record this very short video message on Oxfam's Young Leaders Fellowship Program. This has been going through very successfully in many countries, and 8 young fellows are engaging with their respective networks, and this meeting is also part of that. We started this program to engage with young people. We believe in Oxfam that the future belongs to young generation in Asia. And today's challenges, from climate change to poverty to reduced space to express themselves are going to affect the future generation and you people. So if these challenges are going to affect you, then you should have a strong voice in different forums to shape the future, that future policies and programs and practices and politics that are going to affect you. Therefore, I would urge all of you to engage proactively and monitor and judge that which policies and programs and practices in Asia are affecting us, and how do we organize ourselves, communicate better, engage and remain connected so we can change and influence and engage in those policy making processes and make youth more sensitized and aware of their challenges and issues that they face. So let's work together. Future belong to you. So the economic, political, social policies, civic space, democracies, all have to be shaped in a way that serve the purpose of the future generation. And let's work together to make the future more safer, more fairer, more inclusive for everybody. Once again, thank you very much. And I will be looking forward to engaging you more in the future.
Thanks for that. And now I would like to call Aparna Sanyal, the founder of the Red Door. I met her almost like a year back through the TRD and Kriya Fellowship, and it's been a lovely relationship. Thank you for helping me pull this together off. But yeah, Aparna, please.
So, somebody just said a little while ago that we're a bunch of misfits, awkward people, all together in this space. And I have felt for a very long time, and I think it's one of the core principles of the Red Door, which is that let's all celebrate our awkwardness. Let's all celebrate being misfits, because it's the misfits who call out and tell people around them, tell the world, tell society that, hey, there's something that's not quite right. The ones who fit in have no interest in changing the world, right? So instead of feeling guilty or bad or apologizing for us not fitting in, let's celebrate the fact that we don't, right? And I'll tell you something, something that I've constantly faced. And I think my being for short, for instance, not fitting in, right? I mean, there was a time in my life where I would be very, very conscious about coming on stage, right? Because I would not be seen behind the podium, right? But then you learn that it's all right to not fit in. It's all right to, not be adult sized. It's all right. It's fine, right? And we are all gloriously different, gloriously flawed, perhaps. And maybe there's a reason we're flawed, and maybe we need to celebrate that, right? But having said that, I think the trouble really is that the things where we don't feel like we're misfits, perhaps we make others feel alienated in those spaces. We are perpetrators as much as we are victims. And if we can become a little more conscious of that, because we're very conscious of the times when we're victims, when we're feeling like we don't fit in, but there are a number of times when we don't allow others to feel like they're fitting in. So here, all of us here, this little community of misfits, of people who are awkward, if we can take a little pledge today and say that we will not try, or rather we will try and make sure that those who don't seem to be fitting in around us, we'll take that extra little step towards making them feel like they belong. Because see, we can't change the world without changing ourselves, right? Change begins with us. So if we begin to change the way we experience the world, perhaps the world will begin to change as well. So just on that note, and I just want to celebrate Soumya because I love Soumya. I mean, I always knew that she was, meant for big things. I don't know if she believed it herself, but I always did. And I continue to, and I will always be a big cheerleader for Soumya. And I mean, all my other fellows as well. But yeah, I mean, Soumya, I always knew you were special. So, on that note, I'm so happy that all of you are here, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation. And thank you once again to Atypical Dikkatein for putting this together, and Soumya. And thank you all for coming, and thank you everybody who's joined online. Let's begin.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Tanaz Mehreen, who gloriously just forgot her cue. But I'll be here introducing the panel and just giving you everyone an overview of what we are looking forward to today. So, our panel theme revolves around intersectional advocacy, bridging gaps between sectors, and focusing on fostering a conversation among professionals from diverse fields on creating comprehensive and intersectional advocacy strategies. The agenda for our discussion is centered on exploring how collaborative efforts between various sectors can effectively bridge gaps and strengthen advocacy endeavors. We aim to delve into innovative approaches that promote inclusivity and address the multifaceted needs of individuals at the intersection of queer and disability rights. So, first up, we have the amazing Shefali, who will be moderating the session. Can we have a round of applause for Shefali, everyone? Okay, yes. If those panelists could keep at a pace that is interpretable and coherent to everybody, it would be amazing. So, first we have Shefali, who uses she, they pronouns. Shefali is an experienced scholar and professional with a bachelor's and master's in education, along with a postgraduate diploma in special education. She is the founder of the nonprofit project Beyond Barriers Education, dedicated to capacity building for inclusive education. She brings diverse experience ranging from youth mobilization at Atypical Dikkatein to disability inclusion at Reach Sci, Cambridge University, and serving as the social media manager for I Can Study Australia. Shefali's journey is guided by the cause of equity, accessibility, and belongingness, aligning with her identity as a neurodivergent feminist, disabled, and queer professional. Shefali is an active champion of youth activism and advocacy, further strengthening her dedication to creating equitable and positive spaces. So we have our moderator, Shefali. Next up, we have our first panelist, Ankur Paliwal. Ankur uses he, they pronouns. Can we have a count of applause for Ankur, everyone? Ankur is a journalist and founder and managing editor of queerbeat, a journalism venture focused on accurately covering LGBTQIA+ communities in India. He is also a senior editor with CNN, editing a series of stories on non-binary people in the global south. In his 13 years of journalism career, Ankur has written about science, inequity, and queer people from South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa for various publications including The Guardian, Nature, and 52. He has a master's degree in science journalism from Columbia University, and he is the founder and managing director of queerbeat. Can we have a round of applause? Next, we have our second panelist, Andrea Borua. Can we please have a round of applause for Andrea, everyone? Andrea uses they, them pronouns and is a queer Adivasi neurodivergent political artist and AI engineer from rural Tripura in India. They founded Shore AI, a techno-feminist initiative combating hate speech on social media. In India, mixed vernacular languages starting with Hinglish. Shore AI is specially trained to identify queer phobia, ableism, casteism, communal hate, racism, political hate, sexism, and general hate. Shore AI's impactful work and art have gained recognition from the United Nations, prestigious art journals, and collaborations with organizations such as Mavelinadu, Goethe Institute, etc., and featured in major media outlets such as the Times of India, Analytics India Mag, Quint, Indian Express, BuzzFeed, etc. Andrea's efforts at the intersection of technology, art, and activism aim towards a more inclusive internet. Next, we have Anushri.
Let it go.
Anushri, who just dropped her name tag uses they, them pronouns and is a non binary queer divergent unicorn. They are also a mental health professional but consider themselves as a client first. Their therapeutic practice is embedded with trauma informed queer affirmative neurodivergence affirmative practices. They have a postgraduate diploma in counseling psychology from Xavier's Institute of Counseling Psychology, Mumbai, and a master's degree in clinical and counseling psychology from TIS Mumbai. Additionally, they are trained in expressive arts therapy, transactional analysis, queer affirmative practices, and narrative practices. During their masters, they conducted a research titled Narratives from the Margin: Impact of COVID on Mental Health of LGBTQ community, which studied the psychosocial impact, well-being, and resilience and help-seeking behavior of the LGBTQ community. Next, we have Smriti Shudha. Smriti? Smriti uses she, her pronouns and has been working on the issues of gender, sexuality, and female leadership with grassroots collectives, national, regional, and global organizations for the past 9 years or so. Currently at Arrow, Smriti is working on a program aimed at health systems, strengthening on improving to SRA chair, especially safe abortion. In the past, during her tries with Kriya, she engaged actively in the It's My Body program that used sports as a medium for adolescents and young women to access SRHR and reclaim public spaces in India. She also worked around the intersection of disability and sexuality of young people globally. She specializes in building capacities and implementing strategic programs on complex issues around lenses of intersectionality in disability and gender, SRHR, and feminist leadership spaces. We have our final panelist, Smriti Sudha, everyone. With that, I hope that we have a very fruitful roundtable discussion, panel discussion right now. So, yeah, good luck to everybody, and I hope everyone has a great time. Handing it over to Shefali.
Thank you, Tanaz. Everyone's fitting in the misfits. All right. Since I have Anushri closest to me, I'm going to start with Anushri, which was a sleek way to say that because my opening question was for them. So the theme of the panel is intersectional advocacy through intersectoral collaboration. That's a lot of words, but we are just going to dive deeper into it. Starting with you, how do you personally define intersectionality and intersectional advocacy as a mental health professional?
Okay, so intersectionality as a concept means that how systems of inequality oppresses identities on the basis of caste, religion, gender, sexuality, physical disability, mental disability, invisible and visible disabilities, and how these identities play a role in people's lives in form of privileges and oppression. We cannot talk about intersectionality without taking the name of Kimberly Crenshaw, who the work of intersectionality is attributed to her. So for me, when Shefali asked that what's intersectionality means for me, from a mental health in a mental health space, um, it means that I bring in the lens of intersectionality in the mental health space, whether it's whether it's in this room or whether it's in a therapeutic room. That means that I would be having the intersectional lens in the sense mental health is not apolitical. Mental health is rooted in politics. It is political. It is important to have the social justice lens. It is important to have as a therapist, my work to be rooted in social justice, social equality, using the intersectional lens, along with the other lenses that our training bring, like the trauma informed lens, the neurodivergent affirmative lens. Um, with that, um, that would mean that in terms of when a client enters your therapy space, they do not leave any of their identity outside the space. Each and every intersection of their identities play a major role in their lives, and it would be harm if you have to leave your identities outside a therapeutic space which claims to be a safe space. um, so how, as a therapist, I would try to create a space where where the client comes with all the identities within the room, and it's not just them coming. It's also about me acknowledging that and affirming those identities, and also seeing everything from those lens. Um, and also to understand the interplay of the therapist and the client's identity. So as a therapist who identifies as non-binary, queer, and is autistic, so how are my identities also interplaying there? um, and to understand my identities in the professional settings with other mental health professionals, because over there all the mental health professionals are not on the same ground. So what does that look like for me to come on board with mental health professionals with different forms of marginalization and oppression and different forms of privileges as well? So yeah, so that was
How do you think we can sort of foster intersectoral collaborations through this advocacy? Especially because I know, like, this is something we were also discussing the other day, that mental health sort of intersects with everything. Like, there has to be that lens in everything you see. So I would really like you to like dive into that across sectors. How do you see that playing out?
So when we talk about mental health, a lot of it also needs to be rooted in collective healing. It needs to be rooted in community healing. That means that our community spaces that we provide needs to be intersectional. And how that would look like is to understand if we are, for example, if we are having a, a support group for neurodivergent people, and there would be neurodivergent people coming in that group, but within that group there would be intersectionalities at play as well, on the basis of religion, caste, gender, sexuality. And how are we then making spaces for these identities and creating the group so that in terms of we do not just be like, okay, neurodivergent space, and not not consider caste, not consider religion, not consider gender. you know from that, it also is important in terms of I think every sector needs to also start from itself before they also try to collaborate with other sectors. So before talking about intersectoral, I just want to add, within the mental health sector as well, the intersectionality lens needs to come in while training the therapist as well. So it starts from there. Uh, the trauma informed lens needs to come in, because a lot of what we see is not looked from that trauma informed lens, and it's, or if it's looked, it's not looked from the intersectional lens, it's not looked from the social justice lens. So we need to bring on all the lenses and make an amalgamation of that to kind of have this gap, to bridge this gap. So now in terms of intersectoral collaboration, so here the panelists are here. So for example, if we talk about journalism, which Ankur is from, and how mental health is also part of reporting, like how you report on certain issues, how you report on certain uh, uh, like global events that are happening, or the even what is happening in this country today. So how you report that, how you report about not just about mental health, disability, queer rights, about everything, and how can that be looked from a trauma informed lens. At the same time, it's also about the journalist going on the field and finding those stories and writing and reporting about it. So how does that impact them, and looking that from a trauma informed lens as well. And in terms of mm, like when we talk about tech, and like Onria is working on like Shore, and like they will talk about it more. But in that also, what they are bringing is understanding that how certain words are not like flagged, and they would be like working on that. Yeah. And so that way we would have like intersectoral collaboration. But in terms of that, I think what requires is trauma literacy in every sector. What does that mean is that how can we build trauma literacy in every sector, which is not just a one-off event, which is an ongoing process of slowly building of learning and unlearning and relearning. And how can that be as a way to look a way forward, the next way forward that I could see. Yeah.
Thank you, Anishri, for that. We were talking about tech spaces, and we all just got an introduction of Ari and what they're doing with Shore AI. So, my next sort of question is from you, because you're a tech professional. So, what are your views on intersectional advocacy as somebody who is a tech professional and who's been in the space for a while now?
So I was in the industry for a while, like a bunch of years. I did my BTech, and then I was in a very nice job. I was very well settled. I was working with a startup in Bangalore. And what I realized there is that that space is very much dominated by people who are not like us. So and like in that space, when you fit in so well, it's very easy to not be political and just like keep growing, like financially be stable. So but for me it was very difficult because I belonged to a place where I did not really fit in there, and I had issues which I could see can be solved with tech. But what the hell are we building there, like like something that can be delivered in 10 minutes, we are working on how can we deliver it in 8 minutes. Like who needs that 2 minutes more of time? Like we are not solving problems which are actually required for grassroots level people, but like some people for like we're solving small problems for very privileged people there. So that is one thing I have noticed in tech, that particular corporate world, which is why I moved out of that. Like if I have that potential, if tech has that potential, why don't we go solve those things? But then when I started it, when I moved out of that, I realized why people don't go there. So I'll touch on that also. So see, I started working with Indic NLP, that is AI, natural language processing in Indian language, from my college time. So I wrote my first paper when I was doing my BTech final year. Then I realized how there is so much possibility, so much like see, ChatGPT can literally write everything, and like we have so much resources in tech. Then why are these things not getting used to solve anything? So now with if you go look up research papers in tech, you will see people solving the biggest of issues, but no one actually implements that in reality. Now I could have just made the AI, wrote a paper and left, which I did in college. I wrote my first paper, and that was that. We did not really implement it in grassroots or actually make it into a product. So now when I did the same with Shore, when I made the AI model, I wanted to make sure that this actually becomes a solution that actually solves something instead of just being a paper. So what I felt in tech is that there is a huge gap in what research is being done and what papers are being published to what actually comes to the to actually implementation. And that difference, that gap is between the private and public sector. In public sector, good research is being done, but all the research is like all the implementation gets very commodified because of capitalism. So nothing really actually happens. So yeah, that was
How do you see Shore AI promoting intersectional advocacy? And this is also your cue to talk a lot about Shore AI here.
okay, I think to talk about how Shore is intersectional, I have to give a little bit background about Shore. So when I was doing my BTech, I kind of started understanding how marginalized I am, because in that space most people are upper caste, upper class people, and I was always alienated and I was always bullied even in college. So I was so frustrated, I started doing art a lot, and that's how hues on my canvas happened. So I started drawing and expressing myself and taking up space through art on social media. And when I started doing that, I realized that the hate and discrimination which was there in the physical world also percolates to online. So I started getting a lot of hate speech, a lot of hate campaigns started against me. Like thousands of comments would come and they would all be very vile, and it would all be in English, because it's India. In India, most of the hate speech and like the upper caste people are mostly speaking Hindi. So so every time I tried reporting those things, nothing would happen. How many people will you block if 1000 people are writing stuff? So and I was like, see, the big companies like all the social media companies, they have so much data. Why are they not like working on their content moderation? Right. And I realized that the content moderation which is in place is mostly not in our language at all. So they have built a product, left it in our market where people speak different languages in our countries, but they have actually not tried to solve the problems that will come out of that, which is hate speech, which is in this language. And the content moderation only works when you write exactly good, proper English words without any obfuscation, even no stars, nothing. You put one star, it's done, nothing will happen to it. So I realized that one, even if I make a list of words that are abusive, is not gonna work, because people are talking in Hindi but typing in English because we have a English keyboard. So now what happens? It gives rise to code mixed language in technical terms. So what happens there is that people are saying something in Hindi but typing it in English, and now there are no fixed spellings. You pronounce it in a certain way, so you write it like that. 2 minutes already. Okay. Okay. So yeah, so that gave rise to the idea that I have to be able to detect, use AI to detect hate speech which is in our language. So now why it is intersectional? Because when I started off, the kind of abuse I was getting was mostly queer phobic and gendered. But when I started trying to tag and tag the data, I realized that a Muslim person was getting more hate than me. A Muslim queer person was getting even more hate. I cannot solve queer phobia without considering all the intersections where the same thing is happening or worse things are happening. So the solution always has to be intersectional. Um, I think did I answer the intersectionality question?
Yes. You can continue going in that into that question. I know you have a lot to say.
uh, yeah, so when I started tagging just queer phobia, I realized that is not going to work. So from a one dimensional thought, I went ahead to 8 dimensions, which was queer phobia, communal hate, casteism, racism, ableism, sexism, political hate, and general hate. So it became like a 8 dimensional much bigger project, and so it becomes intersectional that way. And when I started doing this research, I realized I can also bring out a lot of empirical data. Like we already know that a Muslim queer person will get more hate, but before Shore AI, where I actually collected the data and tagged, there was no numerical way of showing that this kind of how the severity works of hate, how there is actually a hierarchy we know about, but there was no empirical way of showing it. But with this data, I was able to show that. Yeah, I think this is it.
Thank you, Andrea.
There was another.
Do you want to talk about intersectoral advocacy through this?
Okay, intersectoral. See, I think. Okay, should I talk or not?
We'll circle back to you. So cute. Yeah, but thank you for that insight because I know I personally find tech sector a little intimidating, and I know sectors tend to sort of operate in silos, and that is where my next question sort of come in for Ankur, because you are a media professional and a science journalist. So what do you think about how these sectors operate in different silos, and what has like your experience been, because you are the founder and managing director of queerbeat?
Thanks for the question, and I'm very happy to be here. I kind of feel like a misfit in the panel where there are experts and journalists are never experts. We just go to people, yeah, ye bata do, and then you write the things. So we are always trying to make sense of the world around us through experts who are sitting on this panel. So I don't know if I'll make a lot of sense, but I'll try to. And if I go fast, just give me a sign and I'll go slow. So talking about collaboration, I think collaboration is, as we all understand, is key to do any kind of intersectional work to bring, like in journalism, it's key if you want to bring intersectionality in your stories. And the way in media or in queerbeat we see it as that when you have written a story, are most people in our society able to see themselves in our stories? If, say, we have written about mental health, like the example was given earlier, when people are reading the story about queer people and mental health and their experiences in public health systems, for example, is a Bahujan queer person able to see themselves in the story? Or is it mostly experiences of privileged caste people in the mental health spaces, how they are interacting? So when we are telling stories, this is how we try to look at the narrative that we build, is that are people able to see themselves in the story? We, of course, in 2000 words, it's hard to have everyone, but we try and do as much as as much as possible. And I think it would be we would be fooling ourselves if we think or believe that we can represent everyone. Which is why collaborations are, like I said earlier, is key. And this is essentially the reason why I started Queerbeat, and it's in our core tagline that it's a collaborative journalism project. Because I believe just Queerbeat can't represent everyone. We have to work with people who are working in different areas, Muslim queer people, Dalit queer people, and work with them to figure out, have more wholesome stories. And this realization came from, I was a science journalist before, and would read a lot of queer stories in the mainstream media and was extremely frustrated and fed up. Mostly because there were repetitive narratives of whatever is happening in courts, you would get to hear that. And what is happening in courts? Queer marriage. Or some sort of a case is going on. Or what you read in stories is somebody is coming out. That story is important. Or you would read stories about same-sex love. 3 kinds of stories. Or there is a hero narrative that queer people have overcome something and now they're changing the world. Or there is a tragic narrative that something has happened to them. these were just 4 or 5 typical, very stereotypical narratives of queer people in media. And there are no other voices. What's happening to asexual AOS people? What's happening in mental health space? What's happening in to queer people who are living in places like Manipur, where there is conflict going on? There were so many stories. What's happening to older queer people? There are so many stories that were just not written or reflected in the mainstream media space. But why? Because they don't have intersectional news teams. The reporters are privileged from privileged caste, and especially the newsroom leadership is from privileged community. And unless you have intersectional representation at the leadership level, I strongly believe nothing can change, because they would just not see most diverse voices, which is why we are very conscious of very not conscious, very intentional about our collaboration. What we also try to do in queerbeat is slowly we have built a system where we are, if we are trying to collaborate with organizations who work in a specific area, say disability or caste, build in a system where there is a lot of space for pushback. And we try and create, come from a space that this is in for our benefit, or for we are all serving the story together, and make space where we encourage that if we have said something or written something, please correct us. Please tell us that it does not represent you. Please tell us that it is casteist. Please tell us that it is ableist, so that we can correct it. And we can't correct it unless you do a pushback. And we are working at the same level as you are. There is no hierarchy. And once you create that space, we have had so much of pushback. And I love it. Our teams have broken their heads against the wall. Is that kya kare? But you have to create that space, and only then you can allow for more expansion to happen in your story. Do I have any other point left? Yes, yeah. Just one last point I would say is that we probably sometimes don't acknowledge it and glorify collaborations. They should be glorified, but not all collaborations are easy. They can be extremely challenging, difficult, lots of friction, because everybody is coming from different experiences. They have their own agenda, trying to protect their own voices, coming from a trauma-informed space. So be ready, I would say, embrace the friction, the mess, and work through it to make the collaboration work, because it's serving a larger story, like in journalism we say. That's it.
Thank you for that, Ankur. We've had sort of experiences from a mental health therapist to corporate world in tech, and also now the newsroom in Queerbeat. I want to come to Smriti now, who has extensive experience working at the grassroots level. Smriti, what are your experiences, especially when it comes to queerness and disability at the classroom? How does that advocacy happen? Like, what has your experiences been there?
Okay, thanks, Shafali, for the question. I'll be referring to my 10,000 notes that I have brought to the table. I mean, apart from working in urban spaces and national NGOs, a large part of my work has been at the grassroots, with young people basically at the grassroots. So when we talk about grassroots or rural India, the discourses that happen there is very different, and the way it happens is also very different from the urban spaces. Of course, there are feminist discourses, but the conversations are still limited to, you know, a certain kind of feminist leadership that would just address certain kind of, you know, issues like domestic violence, SGBV, not even SGBV, domestic violence, women's leadership, women in labor, women in agriculture, etc. But the conversation around queerness and disability have still been very minimal, and they have still been limited to urban spaces. I recall a training that I was doing, co-facilitating with Nidhi some 2 years back, and she asked a question to a group of 25, 30 women from the grassroots who identify themselves as feminists. She asked, like, how many of you know at least one person with disability in your life? And except for one who knew a person with a visible physical disability, none of the others they knew about or they knew of a person with disability. So the invisibilization of people with disability, queer people, and all people at the margins at rural spaces is even more, and so does the ostracization and discrimination. It even increases more. The systems, if we look at the systems at the rural spaces, they're also very different. I mean, and it's also very complex. There are panchayats, there are gram sabhas, and these spaces are very like hyper heteronormative, they're very ableist, they're very patriarchal in nature. Uh, and they also intersect with informal spaces. For example, if I am a young person and I am going to the panchayat to do an advocacy, say I am going to share there that in the primary healthcare center, the kind of sexual and reproductive health rights that I should get is not present. But when I go to the panchayat, I would encounter with a family member, because these are the same people from the families, from the hamlets that form the panchayats or they form the institutions in the villages. So that is no more a safe space for me to advocate for my rights, right? Hence, the advocacy strategies in these spaces need to be very different. One need to analyze the power structures that are present in rural spaces, in grassroots. Uh, some of the strategies, if I have the time, I'll like to give some examples. During COVID, like when I was working in Kriya, we had this particular mobile radio program. It's not even community radio, it's mobile radio. You don't even need a smartphone for it. You just type a number and you listen to episode. So we had already created a protagonist, and she would, before COVID, this protagonist would talk about how it is important for women to be leaders in panchayat, how they should be feminist leaders. Now, when COVID came in, our all plans changed. We said that this is not going to work. She cannot just talk about, women leaders anymore. She needs to talk about how people at the margins with multiple intersectional identities are suffering, are having issues right now. And that is when we started strategically entering into having conversations about disability, having conversation about queerness, having conversation about trans people, about sex work. And people didn't have anything to do during that time. And this was their one source of edutainment, entertainment, I don't know. But this stirred a conversation in families. People started recognizing that, okay, there are identities which we don't know of, which we are not talking about, and they must be present even around us. So we need to talk about these issues, and the conversations then started in communities. We all have been talking about building young people's leadership, and I cannot stress that more. I think it's very important to build leadership of young people around intersectional issues, around intersectionality. And it's important that these young people not only undergo the sessions, they not only are aware about the sessions, but we also have conversations about how to navigate these conversations in rural spaces, because we do not have language to have conversation on queerness and disability in rural spaces. It is necessary, I don't know, to make curriculums in rural languages, or to make, I don't know, like there must be some form of, some medium of conversation, some language that we need to develop, so that it is easy to have such conversations in rural spaces. And we need to create a model where these young people then further make more young leaders. There needs to be a cascading effect, so that there is a particular way that leadership is also spreading, and it's not just centered and focused.
How do you think we can connect these communities for advocacy, for intersectional advocacy?
Yeah.
Some of your examples from the field, perhaps.
Yeah, so so as much as we talk about movements, we all know that movements are still siloed. They are not intersect. They have not been very intersectional as of now, at least in India. Uh, we need to have a conversation with these systems that I talked about, no, with Panchayati Raj institutions, with women collectives that are there in almost every villages now because of the Sarkari system or because of NGOization. So it is needed that we have this conversation in these spaces so that there is a larger ecosystem that is built. And when young people are advocating for their issues, especially on queerness and disability, then there is an enabling environment for people to talk about these issues. Uh, and it's high time that we speak to people with power now. It's high time that we intervene in the system. Of course, creating a parallel system is very important, but with the little experience that I have had with Arrow in the past 1 year, we are trying to enter into the systems now. We are trying to talk to the sarkars that, okay, बहुत हो गया, अब इस पे आ जाओ. It is difficult, we'll face a lot of backlash, but I think it is now important to intervene in the system because the systems are not going to fall down anymore. They're going to be there for a long time now. Yeah, and do I have time for my last point? Okay, I'll cover that point in the last question.
Okay. I want to come back to Ari. Ari, do you have a parting advice for cross-sectoral intersectional advocacy, given your experience and given Shore?
I think Smriti, Smriti was really correct about this thing that we need to talk to people who are in power. The thing which I was talking about, why even though so much research and good work happens, implementation does not happen, is because there are no funding in those areas. No one wants to solve those issues. It just becomes a paper, gets published, and nothing really happens out of it. For that, and for that we need to talk to people of power so that we get that kind of funding and get be able to sustain the kind of work we are trying to do. And also I think it's very important to talk to people at grassroots and understand what they really want, especially in tech I am talking about, because as I said, tech is trying to solve issues that does not really matter. So we really need to talk to grassroots people and understand the problem and come to a solution. Even with Shore, when I was thinking about how to solve hate speech, I cannot just make a tech product. I also had to understand how the marginalization is happening, why and how the hate speech is happening. For that, I had to make an intersection of tech with social sciences. And then further, I had to also understand the impact, which was mental health, and also a legal battle for a lot of people who go through worse kind of abuse online, which includes doxing and a lot of other issues. So there I also had to collaborate with lawyers to understand the legalities as well as mental health professionals. So I think if we actually try to solve an issue instead of making a commodity out of our product, we would definitely go intersectional, because our problem itself is intersectional. The solution also has to be intersectional. There's no other way.
Thank you, Ari. Ankur, any parting advice?
Very quickly, I feel like, I think, and everybody has said it already, we should see collaborations and intersectionality as our advantage, as the part of our growth strategy, whether it's your organization or you're thinking individually. I would also stress that find partners who are not visible. Because a lot of times we tend to collaborate with people who already have, or organizations who have a very visible identity. We know them through our networks or through social media. Only people who are visible get to be visible because of the systems that enable them to be visible. So I think we need to be very intentional about how we are finding these partners and do that extra legwork of reaching out to people who are not probably as visible but doing great work or maybe better work and have a better understanding of the ground, especially those who are working in small towns and rural India. They don't get to be a part of a lot of systems, but can actually enable a lot of impactful change because they have a better understanding. I'll just give a very small example of a story that we did around mental health. Like I mentioned earlier, that in the story that we had an example of a privileged lesbian woman from Lucknow, and her mental health issues were around that she had had a relationship and breakup, and she was not able to cope with it. But we have a Bahujan, a queer woman in the story. Her mental health experience was about domestic violence in the lesbian relationship. That the privileged caste, her lesbian partner, was abusing her. This would have never come out if in our editorial process we had not put our foot down saying that the story will not run unless we have the intersectional experience. So we waited for this to find a voice and then ran the story, and that's why we had that experience. If we had gone ahead with the story of we have a queer person and a mental health experience and run with it, you would never hear. If you don't wait, put your foot down, and make that extra effort to find voices who are not very visible.
Thank you for that, Ankur. Smruti, your parting thought and perhaps the thing you left out.
I think it is, it is coming through very well from Anku's point. I'm really thankful that you brought this point up. Also, like when we look at networks of young people, so how many networks of young people do we see from grassroots? I mean, there are none. Or even if they are there, then they are not visibilized enough. And even in regional and global networks, people who are representing from the country are always from the urban spaces. So it is important to foster these networks also, and start systemic learning across networks from from other different grassroots spaces in the country. I think it's also interesting and important to intervene in the already existing long present curriculums and training modules, not from just the governments and the systems, but also from NGOs. Like they have been using the same module, same curriculum, like for a long time now. We need to also intervene in these kind of spaces. The last 2 points that I would like to say is, it is important that when we are creating such spaces and doing such work around advocacy, it is important that we document this, because and in the most accessible form, because it needs to be, it needs to go to the most unprivileged spaces, so that we understand the strategies that are needed to advocate for such issues. Lastly, it is fortunate that nowadays a lot of young people are going to funding spaces. And I would completely agree with Ari when they talked about how important it is to navigate funding to do intersectional advocacy and doing strategic intersectional advocacy. So yeah, I would rest my points here.
Thank you, Smruti. Anushri, any parting advice?
Yeah, so I think all the panelists have added a lot of things, so I don't want to repeat that. Like I said earlier about trauma literacy, but now I also want to talk about in terms of language. Now, if you noticed, all of us like spoke in English, and that's also a privilege, right? That's also a form of privilege, a form of that lets us talk and speak in this language, and the resources then gets made in only English language. And then how can we then start translating these resources in regional language in India, and how it would then make, when I talk or say about trauma literacy, if it's only in English, it might not reach all the places, it might not reach the rural spaces. And then how can we also work intersectoral to collaborate and create resources in regional languages to have it reach to a larger audience and not just urban population. Yeah, so that was my parting thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. This was really insightful, and it actually went beyond I think our initial sort of meetings about this. Um, Tanas, would you? Thank you. Okay, if we have any questions from the audience or from anybody online, we can take that for the next 5 minutes.
There's a question from Mohammed, one of our virtual participants, to Ankur. Hi, huge fan of you and Queerbeat Media. I had a question of how your work will be impacted by the latest telecom bills.
I would just say that we are still trying to understand it, so I don't have a fully formed thought on this. I was just going to say that we are still trying to process it, and I don't have a fully formed understanding of it right now. But as soon as we have, we'll definitely write a story about that, and you will get to read.
Thank you, Ankur. Anybody else?
The questions here. Yeah, this one.
And how we can build intersectional curriculum, but in the spaces, because I work in the space where we use creative arts and sports and build curriculums around to develop life skills in the schools. So I just wanted to understand, because there's a huge struggle to translate intersectionality that you practice while training the teachers, or while taking that curriculum to the state partnerships or the stakeholders involved, and talking about the advocacy with the people in power. So is that, what kind of strategies like what can we do about it is my question. Like, how do you translate that?
I think, Jasmine, this work is not easy, and it will take time. It definitely takes time. One thing that I have done with the organizations that I have worked with earlier, what we have done is we have always exemplified and showcased some of the best practices, not just from India, but from our neighboring countries, who are rather smaller countries, have lesser resources, but they have brought intersectional practices, and in their day-to-day practices, in their existing curriculums. Uh, as I speak, we are also, like the organization that I am currently working with, we are designing a program where we will be intervening in the health system in India, and that too in a state like Gujarat, where we will be advocating for safe abortion. So what we are doing there is, we are taking the policy that is already present, because itna bhi to nahi ho raha hai na. You're not giving opportunity for abortion for even 20 or 24 weeks. There also you're creating a lot of stigma and discrimination. So it is important to also analyze the existing policies which are present, the existing language in those policies, and see how best we can use those policies to talk about intersectionality. And the work that you are doing by using sports as a medium to talk about intersectionality, believe me, that will work, and that has worked. And there are many examples in this country that has worked with school teachers, that has worked with mothers, that has worked with families, that has worked with Panchayati Raj institutions, and has created an environment for rural young people to adhere to their rights to access public spaces in the best manner. So if you want, I can share some of the examples with you. We can have a chat about it.
We have another question.
I just have few comments. I'll just quickly go through them. I think first of all, in my experience, the word intersectionality itself is very complicated, and like we are using it as if, like, we are all aware of it, but it has multiple layers. And when we're talking to rural population or population who doesn't speak English, it's not a word that exists in their vocabulary. So the word inclusive exists more commonly than intersectionality. There's no Hindi translation for that. So I think that's one major thing that definitely needs to be done. And uh, I think somebody mentioned about the recognized organizations and recognized people who are, visible. But unfortunately, that's how it works. I mean, we are talking about it, but it is the visible people, people with more, ability to communicate and speak like in a crisp words, have certain language. It's only those people who get the spaces. Trust me, I'm speaking from experience. and and even when we're talking about networks, young people are forming their networks, but there are existing networks, feminist networks that already exist who have a lot of experience from the past. There is no way that, there's no space to bring them together. And I don't think that space is being created. That's a very, very very protected space, and it's very hard to get in as a network or as an individual. So yeah, I mean, even if they exist in silos, uh, I think it's not something that we speak about it and then forget about it. But how to build that space where that silos doesn't exist? Like why the silos conversation has been happening for ages. They have been in silos for ages. So what needs to be done? I think that's something that become more as a conversation, which doesn't really depend on what rural population we need to adhere to, but also like what we need to do with ourselves, what changes we need as organizations, as collectives, as donors. I think that's the primary conversation according to me. Then going to like, because we feel like we know everything. It's the rural people who doesn't know anything. They have more experience of implementation of schemes and violations than us sitting here. So I think that's, I mean, we need to just keep these things in mind while, while we're processing these information and trying to bring some sort of response to how to bring, yeah, I think I'll stop.
No, no, thank you for making those points. I think they were very important. Thank you for getting them into the space. Next question from there.
Yeah, hi, I have a question for Ankur. So it's like, how do you navigate or strike a balance between like personal advocacy and like objective reporting in your work?
It's a question I get every time. So I think there is this kind of false understanding within media ecosystem where you say that you are fair and objective and you are always being impartial in your reporting. You have to, in some ways, take a stand in the story that you're reporting by really understanding where the injustice is happening. And if you can accurately prove it through experiences of people, through research, through documentation, then present it in a way that the weight lies here. And that is why we have a concluding statement or an understanding that after you've read this story and also read the contradictory view, we also try and present a contradictory view that not everybody believes in this, and there is a different way people think, and it's really important to include the contradictory view so that reader gets a fuller understanding of while the weight lies here and this seems more true, there are contradictory voices too. And to answer your advocacy question, I think journalism is advocacy. So as long as you're presenting the truth, sometimes it's hard to understand what the truth is. It's very complex. We try to go as close as possible to the truth and tell people we don't exactly know the truth, but this is how far we have gone and this is what we know. And I think that's the advocacy we do. One more question, I guess. Yeah.
Let's take just one more question.
Um, I'll speak in Hindi क्योंकि in English it just becomes very hard. तो मुझे बस पूछना था कि ये सब कुछ कर रहे हैं और हर कोई अपने तरीके से कोशिश कर रहा है कि हमें कुछ तो करना है, बदलाव लाना है, बट वो करने के लिए इन द एंड पैसे लगते हैं और करेंगे क्या कि मतलब ठीक है मुझे पता है कि हाँ मुझे ये करना है, यहाँ पे करना है, वो करना है, बट घर जाके मुझे बिल पे करना है और खाने का करना है एंड फंडिंग के लिए अप्लाई करेंगे, वो भाषा भी सो मेनी हर्डल्स आर देयर इन दैट कि एक ऐसा फॉर्मेट चाहिए, तुम्हें ऐसी वाली लैंग्वेज चाहिए, यू से दोज वर्ड लाइक इंटरसेक्शनल वुमेन लेड एंड ऑल ऑफ दोज थिंग्स, और फिर तुम्हें फंडिंग मिल जाएगा, और फिर वो जिन्हें भी मिलता है वो लोग भी मतलब आधा पैसा जा रहा है फाउंडर के पास, बाकी का जो बोलते कि हम बेनिफिशियरीज को दे रहे, बेनिफिशियरीज को भी अटका के रखते कि ये पूरा जो कुछ भी एनवायरनमेंट के आगे तुम सर्वाइव नहीं कर पाओगे, जो कुछ भी है हमारे इसमें उसके आगे तुम्हारे स्किल्स नहीं रिकग्नाइज करेंगे, तो कैसे लड़ते रहे या जो कुछ भी कोशिश कर रहे हैं, क्योंकि पता है यार करना है, सबको पता है यहाँ पे एवरीबडी इज स्ट्रगलिंग, बट इन द एंड इट कम्स फॉर द चॉइस दैट आई नीड टू फीड माई सेल्फ एंड टेक केयर ऑफ माई मेंटल फिजिकल एंड ऑल ऑफ दोज थिंग्स एंड देन दिस, एंड इट्स अनफॉर्चुनेट कि ये दोनों चीज़ें अलग अलग करनी पड़ रही है. तो या
पैसे का सवाल कौन एड्रेस करेगा?
स्मृति.
Here is mic, yeah.
मतलब मैं एड्रेस तो नहीं कर पाऊंगी क्योंकि मेरे पास भी नहीं है पैसे
मेरे पास भी नहीं है.
तो अभी लाइक 2 दिन पहले ही साइंसेस इतने स्ट्रांग हो गए हैं स्पेशली इंडिया में कि फूक फूक के कदम रखना पड़ रहा है, वी ऑल नो दैट, एंड ये कोशिश हो रही है
कंप्लायंसेस
मतलब FCRA, हमें एक लाइसेंस की ज़रूरत है, हमें एक पर्टिकुलर सर्टिफिकेट की ज़रूरत है, अदरवाइज सर्वाइलेंस रहता है सरकार का हमारे ऊपर कि हम फॉरेन फंडिंग ले रहे हैं तो कहाँ से ले रहे हैं, और अगर हमारे पास FCRA ना हो तो हम फॉरेन फंडिंग नहीं ले सकते, और बहुत सारे बड़े बड़े NGOs के फॉरेन फंडिंग बंद हो गए हैं क्योंकि उनके FCRA लाइसेंस रद्द.
Just quickly add to that, a small point which you have already said is that I think funding agencies themselves need to change a bit. उनको अपने requirements broad करने पड़ेंगे और ऐसे रखने पड़ेंगे कि आपके पास जब तक ये नहीं है in terms of intersectionality, जिसको आप कैसे भी interpret करें at rural level, leadership के level पे, capacity building के level पे, कहाँ जा रहा है reporting requirement के level पे, मैंने देखा है अपने एक्सपीरियंसेस में कि वो ऊपर वाले ने जो बोल दिया, रिपोर्टिंग वाले ने जो बोल दिया, बस वही मान लिया जाता है. एग्जैक्टली क्या हुआ, किसके पास कितना गया और उसका इस्तेमाल कैसे हुआ, उसका इम्पैक्ट कैसे हुआ, उसके ट्रिकल डाउन इफेक्ट को नहीं देखा जाता, और किसने काम किया, कौन डेटा कलेक्टर है, कौन राइटर है उसका, ये इस पे कोई फोकस नहीं रहता. सो आई थिंक फंडिंग एजेंसीज आल्सो नीड टू रियली अंडरस्टैंड काम होता कैसे है और हम किस तरीके से एट स्पेसिफिक लेवल इंफॉर्मेशन लें टू मेक द सिस्टम्स मोर equitable. वो नहीं करती हैं फंडिंग एजेंसीज.
Just to add, as the conversation is about funding, it keeps me bothering is that who has the money? Is it us who are talking in this room about certain issues and we are well aware and we are engaging with new voices and new discourses? Do we have the money? No. But who has the money is some people who probably are well protected from anything that challenges their world. So who are sitting, who is going to the private universities, private schools, who is putting money in there? So one thing for us to do is, as much as we go to the grassroots to engage with, how many of us can enter into any elite school right at the center beside this area? We can go and really talk about what we are talking about. we can't. So somehow our advocacies and our interventions has to go there. Like, as somehow I feel like in the sector, there is this approach that there's this working down approach, but we never go to a place which is like very urban, very elite, very English speaking schools where we go and we really talk about caste, or we talk about, so we can't do it. So somewhere our advocacies, as much as we do here, we go there. Similarly, as young people, there is so many young people's networks where we dignity becomes a conversation, right becomes a conversation, but really shamelessly asking we need money is not part of that. So I think that is also important. As much as we create network, we will also give them a vocabulary where we say we need money. Just the participatory grant making is the new buzzword in like development sector funding, where we will have grassroots people to have make decisions about money to look great, but at the same time we are not giving the networks that we are forming, we are not giving them the vocabulary that, hey, ask for money directly, ask, have the conversations about money. So that shame around asking money is still there. So these are two things that's very important, that we go talk to rich people. Maybe even we have to think that when we are organizing a film festival, an event like that, who our invitees are. Like maybe somewhere there also we need to consciously invite that one person who listens. Maybe think of that, ki my money should go here. This one rich person who sits here. So somewhere we have to think strategically, otherwise this existing donor bases who are already really working inside a lot to make their grant making less bureaucratic, they are really doing it because they know us. But who doesn't know us, we need to go there. So these two bits.
Okay, I'm sorry, but like just quickly two things for specifically for funders. Core fund needs to be provided more often. Project-based funds create a lot of trouble and they do not last. So core funding is very important. And the personal cost is always, okay, keep it less. Like the project cost should be more than the personal cost. Why? Like, aren't we humans to, we need to be paid enough to work better. So I think that's definitely two things that really need to be emphasized on. Like whoever donors are present here, just bringing this up.
Can I? 1 minute. We just have 1 minute.
I think I completely agree with what Biraj and Abhiti, both of you have brought up regarding funding. And ये जो हम पर्सनल कॉस्ट का भी रखते हैं ना, तो वहाँ पे भी कोई इंटरसेक्शनल एंगल नहीं होता है ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस का. मतलब हम डिसेबिलिटी का इंटरवेंशन कर रहे हैं, लेकिन हम पर्सनल कॉस्ट फॉर ट्रेनिंग फॉर वन पर्सन, वन डिसेबल्ड पर्सन एक ही रखेंगे. पीए का कॉस्ट कहाँ गया? You know, where are the support cost? Where are the, where is the intersectionality lens, even in budgeting, even in funding? Exactly. And the one thing that I was also, it's so uncomfortable, no, to talk about money ki hum salaries bhi nahi mangte hain. As young people, hame itna uncomfortable kar diya jata hai to ask for consultancy fee, to ask for salaries. And सिमिलरली हम जब रूरल स्पेसेस में जाते हैं, पंचायत फंड नाम का एक बड़ा सा फंड आता है, पर वो फंड के बारे में भी हमें नहीं पता होता है जब जो रहते हैं गांव में, जो गांव में काम करते हैं, और उस फंड में भी हमारा कितना हक है और हम उस फंड को कैसे इस्तेमाल कर सकते हैं, उस बारे में भी बात नहीं होती है. सो आई थिंक दैट कॉन्वर्सेशन ऑल्सो नीड्स टू हैपन at different levels.
Thank you so much for answering, everyone.
So I'd like to thank everyone for their time and patience while listening in on what has proved to be an extremely illuminating discussion. From Anushri talking about the politicization of identities and viewing mental health through a trauma-informed lens to Andrea dropping a what the hell, and talking about the technological wonder that is sure AI. This has been an experience that we can all think about and learn from. The necessity to see yourselves in stories and the importance of collaboration in building narratives was covered beautifully by Ankur. And Smriti also weighed in on feminism in the grassroots and building young people's leaderships, and also shared edifying experiences of her time in the field. With these points in mind, let us thank the panelists, Shifali for moderating, and for the rest of us for being such an amazing audience and having such an illuminating round of questions and answers. And let us proceed with the rest of this amazing day. Thank you.
Um, Thank you, everyone. That was like a very passionate, energetic, and important conversation. Loved it. But we'll quickly break for tea, and we will be back here at 11:05. Please, we have another roundtable discussion. So 11:05, please. Thank you, everyone. Hope that was a good break, and you got some time to talk to each other. Let's settle down. We'll start with the roundtable. Okay. I'll just introduce Pritha and Gayatri. Both of them are from our youth network, and they'll take over the introductions of who are the roundtable participants and panelists for this part of the event. And yeah, I'll give it over to Pritha and Gayatri now.
Hi, folks. I hope you had a good tea and break, and we'll be starting with the roundtable now. I'll introduce myself briefly, and I'll be joined by Gayatri, my really close friend. We are part of the youth network at Atypical Dikkatein, and I've been working with Soumya for quite a while on Atypical Dikkatein. It's an initiative that I never thought would culminate into something like this, and it's heartening to see everyone join online and offline here. So here's hoping to a great insight sharing session. Um, We'll be starting with something known as multicultural queer disabled narratives, which is a discussion that aims to highlight the diverse experiences of individuals who identify as LGBTQ plus disabled and from multicultural backgrounds. The interconnected nature of different forms of discrimination such as casteism, sexism, homophobia, and ableism can compound the experiences of individuals with multiple marginalized identities. Lack of representation and visibility in mainstream media and society, discrimination and stigma based on multiple identities and barriers to education, employment, and economic opportunities are challenges that we come across and tend to navigate without systemic support.
Hello everyone, I'm Gayatri. Very glad to be here today. And I've been associated with Atypical Dikkatein since August, and I primarily work in education. So yeah, so the event will now transition into a dynamic 2 hour youth led roundtable. Young, queer, and disabled leaders will take the stage, sharing their personal experiences and perspectives. This youth roundtable discussion aims to spotlight the diverse and intersecting experiences of young Indians at the intersection of multicultural, queer, and disabled narratives. We seek to foster an open dialogue, sharing perspectives, and discuss the interconnectedness of these identities within our society. Our goal is to understand how these intersections shape individual experiences and to explore avenues for more inclusive and supportive environment for young Indians navigating these diverse identities.
I'll now welcome Aishmita Samal, who is the moderator of this event. Aishmita is a young neuroqueer individual who lives with multiple mental illnesses. She's an intersectional feminist researcher, educator, and freelance consultant. She works on sexual and reproductive health and rights and invisible disabilities while leading the research and monitoring wing at Project Bala. Aishmita is a research fellow with the Center for Inclusive Policy and is researching barriers faced by individuals with invisible disabilities in obtaining a disability certificate and UDID in India. Ayushmita hopes to integrate the disability movement with sexual health and rights and takes a right based approach to social justice. Now I welcome our first participant of the roundtable. It will be Jasmine Shaukat Ali Khoja. Jasmine is a queer Muslim feminist and a neurodivergent computer engineer from rural Maharashtra, India, who has transitioned into the social impact space because of their lived experiences. Over the past 5 years, they have worked on strategic design and capacity building with a focus on feminist and youth leadership development. Their work majorly includes advocacy on gender, sexuality, business, and human rights alongside educational initiatives at Amnesty International India. Jasmine has also led the Right for Rights campaign for UKC Amnesty Canada and has been involved in mobilizing for the I Welcome Rohingya campaign in India. Currently, they are a principal contributor leading diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives at Dream a Dream and is also spearheading disability policy design, strategy, implementation, and early prevention program for the organization. Jasmine is the founder and CEO of Man Samvad, an initiative focusing on building a mental health ecosystem for higher education institutions. Um, now I'll welcome Joshua Mark George. They are a trans non-binary person with ADHD and autism with a master's in professional counseling from Monash University, Malaysia, project coordinator at I Hear Sangat Bhopal for the Disability Inclusive Compassionate Care 2.0 and Queer Chronicles projects. They are also the founder of ADHD People, an online support group for LGBTQIA plus people with various neurodevelopment conditions, currently comprised of over 200 members. In their free time, they offer counseling services to adult clients across India and Malaysia with specific focus on queerness, ADHD, and autism.
Next, I'd like to welcome Shivani Mamkeen. As a contractual assistant professor of law at National Law University, Odisha, they find joy in the dynamic realm of teaching and learning. Their research expertise lies at the intriguing intersection of law and queerness, with a particular focus on queer legal theory. In their commitment to fostering inclusivity, they create content that sheds light on the LGBTQIA communities multifaceted experiences, examining the impact of societal constructs, policies, and global events. Beyond the classroom, they extend academic mentorship and motivational influence through online platform, aspiring to make legal education and practice accessible to all segments of society. At present, they teach constitution laws and administrative law. In the past, they've also taught a personally designed course on law and queerness. Their involvement extends beyond the classroom, where they're dedicated to contributing to a more inclusive and informed legal landscape. Next, I'd like to welcome Tanaz Marine. Tanaz is a human rights advocate and social activist from Northeast India. Marine has worked extensively with the Cure movement in Guwahati and has been an organizer for Cure Pride Guwahati. As a deputy chairperson of the India Mexico Youth Forum, she has contributed to the facilitation of cross cultural dialogue. She is also an active research scholar with their areas of interest spread across philosophy, queer studies, ethical practices in information technology, and many more. She is also a hip hop recording artist with performance in venues like IIT Guwahati, Piano Man, Jazz Club, Indraprastha College for Women, and so on under her belt. And now let me welcome Shreyas. Shreyas is a 22-year-old person from New Delhi who graduated with a bachelor's degree in psychology from University of Delhi in 2022 and has worked in the development sector for over a year. Currently, he is working as an intern at the Center for Mental Health, Law and Policy. He likes to read, paint, and listen to music. Once again, welcome all the panelists, and let me hand it over to Aishmita for the
Thank you.
session. Thank you.
Okay, so before we start, just a few points. I know some of us here are only comfortable with English, but I have had requests from our roundtable participants to be able to speak both in English and Hindi, in which case I'll sum anything up that's said in Hindi. I hope that's okay with everyone. Awesome. Okay, so I think it was very interesting when I was going through each of your profiles. Like we have somebody who works in advocacy and also does hip hop. Fascinating, and it was very difficult to come up with questions for all of you, which also highlights the rich experience that each one of you have. Shivani here is joining us online, but that's true for you also. Hi, Shivani. But my first question is for Joshua. We are talking about communities, networks, and what you do is very interesting and affirming, right, for people like me as well. Because you run a community of young neurodivergent individuals. Now, in your experience of building this space, what would you say is the catalyst for young people like us to come together to form a community and support one another? And what are the achievements that you have observed?
All right. So I think the biggest catalyst from what I observed was the failure of mental health professionals, psychologists, psychiatrists to adequately educate themselves about neurodevelopmental disorders, about new research on it. We have a lot of people still using old diagnostic terms like Asperger's, ADD, a bit outdated on what's happening, not really aware of the intersections of gender and how that kind of influences presentations of these conditions or these disorders, for example. So for me, kind of as someone who's in the mental health industry, navigating these experiences, not having any answers and not having sort of any information about myself and understandings of the community I'm a part of and how that intersects with my mental health experiences. Learning that I had ADHD for the first time was just like this information should be more accessible to people. This information should be more readily available. Like, why is nobody sort of sharing this as much? Like, the only people who enlightened me were my friends. They're the ones who are like, oh, you should get a diagnosis, you should figure this out, you should understand this. And I was like, we really need community spaces where there is more sharing, mutual sharing of these resources. And when I started this group, also, it was just a few of us who were just like, yes, we just know each other, we're just friends. We just want to talk about it and stuff. But as I kind of grew, I kind of realized that what a lot of people are looking for is answers, but not more than answers. They're also looking for validation. Like a lot of us, we experience a lot of invisibilization, even in the very industry that's supposed to affirm us and understand us. There's not a lot of mental health professionals, unfortunately, who really know how to do a good autism or ADHD assessment for people who have slipped below the radar or for people who maybe don't present it typically. So having a community of people who don't question you, who don't like force you to prove yourself or prove your symptoms, or it's just sort of given that, yes, you don't have to have the answer, you don't have to know everything, but you're welcome to express yourself. I think that's an important part of what drew people together, is that space where they can just exist and express themselves without fear of judgment, either for their queerness or for their neurodivergence. And as we've kind of grown the space, also an important part of that is acknowledging, I think, intersectional oppression and intersectional forms of oppression, because a lot of the people who run the group also, we are different forms of marginalization that we've experienced. We come from different backgrounds, different communities, and that kind of shows in the work we do. And also the communities we don't represent also shows in the work we do. Like people always ask us, why don't you like open it up to cishet people, for example? They're always looking for community. Well, like, I mean, good for them. But so my take on people say, why don't you just make it, the group's name is ADHD people, why not make it neurodivergent people? But I was like, I cannot speak on behalf of people with BPD or people with man, I'm blanking out, dyslexia or like different other forms of neurodivergence that I don't have lived experience with. I cannot claim to lead or support a group of people. So what we do is we empower people. We tell people, if you would like to, connect with other people who are, have similar experiences, then what we do is we encourage them to start their own group. So we have a lot of offshoot groups. We have the Autistic People group. So I'm obviously a part of it because I'm also autistic. But we have like, the Cooking with ADHD group. We have sort of like I think there's a sports group now that's come up. There's like, accountability buddy group. So there's like a lot of different groups that have kind of popped up, because I think communities are best served and led by people who understand their needs. And also part of that is also acknowledging the limits to which we are able to best serve. Like for example, I don't know how to speak Hindi. I've tried. 3 years, I failed. every single exam. So I can't maybe support people who are Hindi speaking primarily as a South Indian. So if there are groups like that, maybe it's best that people who have the lived experience are best able to lead. That's what also we like to be like. We tell people, yeah, go ahead, do your thing. So I think that intersectionality also comes with understanding limits and not coming from a place of guilt of like, oh my God, I've seen a lot of Savarna guilt being like, oh my God, solidarity, we love you, we're thinking about you during these times. So I realize that's not the most effective way. What helps is yielding space to people who have those experiences to lead. And I think that's what kind of helps. So I think, yeah, I don't know if I've brought in all the points I wanted to do, but also one more thing. Sorry, I don't know if I have enough time. One more thing is group roles are also very sort of acknowledging of our experiences and how tiring and exhausting and difficult it can be. So there is no obligation for support. Nobody is entitled to support. Nobody is entitled to each other's time. Nobody's expected or obligated to participate and to interact and all of these things. It's a very, you don't have to give to receive kind of thing. Oh, thanks. You don't have to give to receive kind of thing. You can take your time. You can take breaks from the group. You can sort of participate at events that you feel comfortable in. If you need to reach out to people on the group, you can do so. If you don't feel comfortable on the group, you can DM, either of the facilitators. We're happy to always support. So that kind of like acknowledging the reality of people's, access to community often is mediated through their like functionality or through their ability right, to participate, to support all of these things, and just giving a space where people can rest. So I think that restfulness is something that kind of helps people feel more at peace. And also like, we are drawn to each other. So it's kind of like a burgeoning sort of thing. So right now we have a referral system that we use because some of the participants come from places or countries where it's dangerous to be outed or to be out there. So we have people kind of hold each other accountable as well. And it's not like a punishing kind of system. It's more of a restorative sort of justice kind of system where we encourage sort of growth, encourage learning, encourage accountability, allow people to kind of hold that space, call each other out, grow together. Because again, as neurodivergent people also, we don't have a lot of access to things that other people do, to knowledge, to experiences, to learning. So creating a safe space where people can make mistakes and kind of do all of that. So yes, I hope that answers the question.
Absolutely, yes, it does. Two things that Joshua said which are very interesting to me. One about people around us telling us how we need help or how we need to get a diagnosis. I remember the first time somebody ever noticed my mental illness was this friend of mine back in college who sat across me and said very lovingly, Ayushmita, you need therapy. I am so thankful to that guy. But and the other thing that Joshua says, the last time we were on a panel together, or I heard them talk, and I came back from Goa and I was like, you know what? I heard this person talk about rest. I'm going to sleep for 2 days. I don't care about anything. So those are the two learning points for me. But Jasmine, my next question is for you. Joshua brought up a very interesting point about how we need to cultivate more intersectional spaces. Right, and you have had experience of working as the co-mentor at the Society for Gender Professionals, which works on applying feminist frameworks globally for policy and practice. Now, in your opinion, as well as experience, how can a community like this foster intersectionality and include queer disabled narratives into policy and practice, nationally as well as globally?
So, if I cry, I'm just having a meltdown, so please hold me. I think we need to acknowledge that feminist spaces does exclude people with disabilities. It was this month, it was just last week, I applied to be a part of a community support group for incest survivors, and I asked for an accommodation, and they said they can't accommodate me because they don't have they don't have adequate resources or trained facilitators. Then I realized I will always be out of these spaces because I don't have access to care. Most of the times growing up in rural India, and now when I look at my work. So, and then in terms of having this access and creating the intersectional space in the feminist spaces or spaces that जो आपको ट्रेन करती है एक ट्रेन जेंडर प्रोफेशनल बनने में, या आपको ट्रेन करती है कि आप इस तरीके की लीडरशिप बिल्ड करें जो इंटरसेक्शनल हो, और इंटरसेक्शनल भी हो तो वो इस तरीके से इंटरसेक्शनल हो जहाँ पे अभी तक सिर्फ हम एक जेंडर और एक क्वियर और एक ट्रांस नॉन बाइनरी तक ही सीमित है। क्योंकि वहाँ पे डिसेबिलिटी फिर भी मेरे लिए मुझे लगता है कि मैं एक मुस्लिम औरत हूँ, और मेरे लिए एक मुस्लिम वुमेन कम्युनिटी भी एक्सेसिबल नहीं है क्योंकि मैं डिसेबल्ड हूँ। तो मुझे लगता है कि इस तरीके की जब हम स्पेसेस की बात करते हैं तो किस हद तक हमारी इंटरसेक्शनैलिटी भी रुक जाती है, क्योंकि ये स्पेसेस एक लर्निंग रिसोर्सेज प्रोवाइड करती है, हमें ट्रेन करने के लिए एक जगह बना रही है। मेरी जो एक को मेंटोर है जो ईस्ट अफ्रीका के एक रूरल जगह से ज्वाइन करती थी जब ग्रुप्स में, तो उसके पास इंटरनेट की बहुत लिमिटेड एक्सेस होती थी, तो हम लोग मोस्ट ऑफ द टाइम व्हाट्सएप पे टाइम डिफरेंस के साथ या ईमेल्स में बात करते थे क्योंकि हम वीडियो कॉल्स पे नहीं मिल पाते ज़्यादा। तो समझ में आया कि किस तरीके की अकोमोडेशंस की भी जब हम बात करते हैं इन स्पेसेस में, तो क्या वो अकोमोडेशंस यूनिवर्सल नीड्स को जब हम देखते हैं तो ये यूनिवर्सल नीड्स बाय डिफ़ॉल्ट क्या है, किस लोगों के लिए यूनिवर्सल नीड्स। हम स्पेशलिस्ट जो बात करते हैं तो यूनिवर्सल नीड्स बहुत टर्म आजकल यूज़ हो रही है कि हमें यूनिवर्सली पॉलिसी को देखना चाहिए, सबके लिए ये पॉलिसी एक एंटी कॉलोनियल लेंस जो फ्रेमवर्क्स है जो फेल कर रहे हैं ग्लोबली या लोकली भी। हम जब बात कर रहे हैं तो जो फ्रेमवर्क्स है जो हमें अप्लाई करने में प्रैक्टिस में इनफ नहीं हो पा रहे हैं, तो यूनिवर्सल नीड्स के तौर पे भी जब हम उसे देखते हैं तो बाय डिफ़ॉल्ट यूनिवर्सल में भी मैं फिट नहीं बैठ पाती। तो क्या है वो यूनिवर्सल, वो भी समझना मुझे लगता है बहुत ज़रूरी है। और उसके अलावा मुझे लगता है जब लोकल कम्युनिटीज़ में एडवोकेसी हो रही है या वहाँ की जो गर्ल्स या क्वियर पीपल या इवन कुछ बच्चे जो डिसेबल्ड है, जैसे अभी कुछ समय पहले मैं बस्तर में थी और एक रिस्पॉन्सिबल टूरिज़्म की स्ट्रेटजी पे मैं थोड़ा एक हॉबी के तौर पे काम कर रही हूँ, तो मैंने देखा कि वहाँ एक बच्ची है जो डिसेबल्ड है और वो रोज़ उसके लिए एक ऑटो लगा दिया गया है, वो जाती है। लेकिन मतलब बोलने का कंक्लूजन ये है कि उन लोगों के पास एक लोकल कम्युनिटी में इन तरीके की जो आवाज़ जो है वो ग्लोबल लेवल पे जब आती है तो उन्हें एक प्लेटफॉर्म मिलता है। और मुझे लगा कि वैसी आवाज़ मुझे एक टाइम पे जब मैं एक महाराष्ट्र के बहुत छोटी जगह पे थी वहाँ पर मुझे मिली, तो उस तरीके से मैं यहाँ तक अभी यहाँ पे बैठ के मैं बात कर पा रही हूँ शायद। लेकिन जब उस ग्लोबल कम्युनिटी में जेंडर प्रोफेशनल्स की कम्युनिटी में मैं जाती हूँ तो वहाँ पे भी इस तरीके के लर्निंग रिसोर्सेस जब अवेलेबल किए मिलते हैं जो मुझे पता नहीं एक्सेसिबल भी अगर हो तो ज़रूरी नहीं है कि वो एक गेज़ नहीं मिलता कि ये रिसोर्सेज मुझे एक्सेसिबल है, लेकिन इसका मतलब ये नहीं है एक रूम में मैं बैठी हूँ और मैं बात कर रही हूँ उस ऑनलाइन स्पेस में, लेकिन इसका मतलब ये नहीं है कि मैं इनविजिबलाइज्ड नहीं होंगी। तो मुझे लगता है कि ऐसी स्पेसेस को बहुत ज़्यादा ज़रूरी है कि एक लिव्ड एक्सपीरियंसेस जो लोकल कम्युनिटीज़ के हैं उन पे बिलीव करके उन्हें इन प्लेटफॉर्म्स को दिया जाए और वो पावर थोड़ा फेमिनिस्ट स्पेसेस में भी शिफ्ट किया जाए। और मुझे लगता है कि जस्ट फिनिश इट कि वो तभी होगा जब हम बहुत ज़्यादा लोकल लेवल पे बताने से ज़्यादा कि ये करिए, समझे कि उनकी स्ट्रेंथ्स जो है लोकल कम्युनिटीज़ में उनको ऑलरेडी पता है बहुत सारी चीज़ें, वो लोकल कम्युनिटीज़ में जो स्ट्रेंथ्स है उसको वो प्लेटफॉर्म दें, ना कि हमारी जो ग्लोबल डिस्कोर्स है उसको वहाँ सेंड करे। आई थिंक।
Thank you so much, Jasmine. It takes immense courage and vulnerability to share your experiences. And thank you so much for doing that for us. I'll just quickly summarize some of the points that Jasmine has shared in Hindi for our English speaking participants. Jasmine spoke about their experience of being a Muslim disabled woman in India and how there have been multiple feminist spaces that have been inaccessible to them because of their intersectional identity of being a Muslim woman with a disability. They also talked about their experience of working with a colleague in Eastern Africa where there was no access to internet and they had to talk to their colleague over WhatsApp and email, and highlighted some intersectional issues, cross-continental intersectional issues. They also talked about the fact that we use the term universal needs these days in the in the development space, but we talk about anti-colonial frameworks as well. But there's a struggle that a lot of people with intersectional identities face in fitting into the definition of universal needs as well. They also talked about their experience of coming from rural Maharashtra and the support within the community that they got, which is why they were able to access some of the spaces that they're a part of. But even with accessibility in place, it may not be contextual, because we do not take lived experiences from the grassroots rural areas into account. And that's such an interesting point that Jasmine talked about. And I was just thinking in my mind how we when we think about feminism, when we talk about intersectionality, what is the definition that we are using? Are we using the European definition of feminism and intersectionality? Is it brown enough? Is it fitting the African context? Is it fitting the Asian context? And how progress can be defined in different ways in different contexts. So thank you so much, Jasmine, for bringing those points. It brings me to my next question for Shreyas. Shreyas, Jasmine talked about feminist disability justice and how feminism can be or cannot be defined, right? Now, taking this conversation forward, you have experience working in the development sector that we have been talking about, even critiquing at points, right? At some points, right? Especially within queer disability rights, that is the space that you have worked in. Now, in your opinion, what can this development or the social sector do to create community or kinship for queer disabled individuals like us?
Thanks, Ayushmata. I think one thing that we already know, and some social sectors already do, is definitely hire people from the queer and disabled communities. But even though that seems very good and is a very good starting point, but there is so much that comes after this, and there is so much that comes because of this. So I remember that. I remember that whenever in my previous organization, and I just wanted to give this quick disclaimer that I am working in my second organization in the development sector, so I don't have a lot of experience, about 15 months. So my experience is majorly of one particular organization, so it's very it may be uninformed, and it may be also be ignorant at times. uh, I just wanted to say that there is having having a disability, having being a person from a queer and disabled communities also makes us have a complicated relationship with God. And whenever there are festivals that are being celebrated, so for example, we have a picture of Lord Ganesha in the kitchen, previous in my previous workplace kitchen. And the problem is not that Lord Ganesha's photograph is there. The problem is that that it's not uh, it's not the religion that that picture is representing is not the only religion that exists, and there are many religions that many queer and disabled people also belong to. And it is not and I'm not sure, and I don't think that when people come to the kitchen for relief, for drinking water to hydrate themselves, I don't think that they want to be reminded of a picture that may have a complicated may have a complicated history with them. And one other thing that I wanted to share was uh, many I was having this conversation with Oindra, and they talked about how AI can be used to help persons with disabilities And I was also, and as a person in the development sector, there is so much of admin work that comes in, RPFs, vendor registration, and you know what, it never ends. It never ends. And when it starts, it seems exciting, but when it ends, another one starts. So so what I was saying is that, maybe AI can also be used to ease our admin related work in the development sector. And things like RPFs, putting our signature in a certain format, these things take so much of time, and AI can probably help with that. And one other thing is that we should probably, and as persons who are applying for grants, we have had a lot of conversation around funding and grants. I don't have a lot of experience with grant writing. Okay, I don't have any experience, but 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 I just wanted to say that, but what I do know is that not every time the research participants who also belong to the communities we belong to, whenever there is a participatory approach, not they are not always satisfied with the output that the funder is looking for. So maybe as a person who, as a grantee, we need to negotiate with the grantor, within both the parties, to ensure that uh, there is that this entire research or this project does not seem like a scam. um, and one other thing that I wanted to say was that there are a lot of conversations around accountability, and ki this that admin sorry there are a lot of conversations on accountability, ki we are here, we acknowledge your disability, but what if you're not, but outputs are also important, which they are. But I was also wondering that, the onus to teach and to educate people about us should not be on us alone. And it should, and there a budget needs to be spent on a budget needs to be spent on yeah, a budget needs to be spent on giving training to admin, to giving training to every to people, in having consultancy meetings, because अगर representation ही नहीं होगी तो हम आगे कैसे बढ़ेंगे. Or one very common thing that happens with research organizations is that there's a lot of politics that happens with research organizations. जो लोग ऊपर हायरार्की में होते हैं, उनको ऑटोमेटिक मिल जाता है को ऑथरशिप, और जो इंटर्न्स होते हैं वो साइड लाइन हो जाते हैं. जो मेरा ऐसा एक्सपीरियंस भी हुआ था, एंड it has taught me so much, but I wonder that if all the time we can get away with just thinking of the narrative that आपने बहुत ज़्यादा सीखा है, तो हाँ मैंने बहुत ज़्यादा सीखा है, लेकिन मेरे को इतना ज़्यादा लॉस भी तो हुआ है. So what I mean to say is that जो conversations around authorship when a project or a research project is starting, ये शुरू में ही हो जानी चाहिए. And I have one or two points which I will bring up a bit later.
Sure, thank you so much, Shreyas. There were several interesting points that Shreyas brought up, and I also go back to the previous panel and how we talked about how AI is being used to tech is being used to making lives difficult for people rather than making it easy, right? Like how I think 25% of jobs are in we are in the fear of losing those many jobs to AI, but AI is not being used to make lives for queer disabled individuals easier, right? So ethical AI is something that we also need to talk about. Thank you so much for bringing that up, Shreyas. I would move on to Shivani now, who's joining us online. Shivani, we have been talking about principles and communities, but we you engage in a lot of on ground advocacy as well, and we would like to hear some of the stories as well from you, Shivani, because you run an online space for advocacy as well as work locally in Odisha. Now, I have a twofold question for you, if you would be kind enough to answer that. What would you consider are the merits and demerits of online versus offline advocacy? Now that we are doing a lot more on online advocacy over the last few years, and how does your context, your individual context of having been working in Odisha come into play? And secondly, if you would like to talk a little bit about the way you actively engage with young people as an educator, how has your experience been with working with such a young community?
Okay, so if I want to discuss this, my viewpoint and experience with respect to online versus offline advocacy, obviously, online advocacy does have just a minute, I'm having a technical sound issue. So, obviously, online advocacy does have a lot of positive aspects, right? Because, like, how I started this platform was when I was in my law school, I did not have any community or not even one person around me who I knew as queer. And I just started talking about it on my social media platforms. And over time, the people from my educational institution and beyond started approaching me because I was the only queer person that they knew of through online medium. And that, in a way, uh, created, a platform for people to connect and uh, discuss their struggles and all such things, right? So, online advocacy definitely helps with the reach. It does not need a lot of financial contribution. It is accessible in the sense that if you do not have people around you in your physical surroundings, still you might be able to access online spaces, right? Uh, but some drawbacks, what we can call is, or I would rather call it. Something which still lacks despite an online advocacy spaces, that even if we are having a virtual space, we have to go back to the physical world where we have to deal with the lack of community, and that might get difficult to deal with. There are certain other aspects also which I feel sometimes become problematic in online platforms, because sometimes people do not realize their consequences of their actions online platforms might also lead to certain mutual effects on people in physical spaces and their personal life. Offline community spaces obviously help in building interpersonal relationships, and because as humans we are used to expecting tangible experiences. So though I think like I am joining you from an online platform and there are so many people there, so I feel that I'm missing out on so many things. You might be talking between sessions, connecting with each other during the tea, but I'm not able to do that right now. So, on offline community spaces fill that void, because as humans we need nurturing. So, uh, online spaces I think are good as a substitute and to fill up the drawbacks or the challenges we feel face as queer and disabled people to find a community. But they cannot, the both these spaces cannot be mutually that if we have an online space we don't need an offline space, or vice versa. uh, Moving on to my experience in Odisha. So I am not from Odisha. This was a new place for me, and it was through engaging in advocacy platforms. I joined the Rainbow Collective here, that I found a sense of community. And what I noticed here was, even though here, when it comes to language or cultural aspects, an outsider here, but I have experienced a lot of welcoming. I've been welcomed really well. Uh, Even though I stay in Bhubaneswar, which is like one of the developed cities in Odisha, as compared to when I lived in other metro cities. So I feel maybe because of the personal experiences of the people here, they're more sensitive to me. So that's how like my analysis of the intersectionality, that because they understand how it feels to be, because mostly even in India till now, most of the popular queer conversations move around the urban elite people. And I think in previous discussions also we have gone through it, how the in legal struggle also people are mostly focusing on marriage equality. Now it's the popular topic, but the lived struggles of other intersections of queerness and disability finally like go into a sideline. Here I have seen very small initiatives being supported by people like one of our like members of our community. He's a trans man. He was supported in opening a food truck, and then we're having the meets at the food truck so that that person can actually be financially benefiting from this initiative that the person is taking. So this has been a very new experience for me, in the way that we actually do very small things which are creating big impacts. Okay, I think my time is up. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Shivani. I'll definitely circle back to you and get to know a little bit more about your work that you are doing, also with the educational spaces that you engage with. And such an interesting thing that Shivani brought up about spaces and cities and how we mainstream some of these cities when we talk about certain, social issues. I remember this one time I logged on to Queering the Map, and I went to Ranchi, which is where I am, and I wanted to see if there are any stories from Ranchi, and I was so happy to find some. Of course, the density is far lesser, but and it was also a little heartbreaking because some of the stories were talking about how I don't have a community. This is not the kind of space where I can thrive, etc. And I realized that I was so privileged living in a bigger city, and I have migrated out of Ranchi. But hopefully, we are able to break that bridge. We are really able to bridge that gap eventually. Um, Moving on from Shivani, my next question is for you, Tanaz. Just like Shivani, you also run advocacy spaces in your community. You have done excellent work on advocacy in Guwahati, and you also highlight local narratives. We have always noticed Northeastern narratives being excluded from the so-called mainstream, right? From the so-called mainstream India. That is, of course, two states, right? Mainstream India is two states. Now, considering this reality, how has your experience of highlighting these local narratives been?
Okay, hi. Thank you so much, Rashmita. That is an excellent question. Hi. Good afternoon to everyone. Good afternoon? Yes, good afternoon. Good afternoon to everyone. I'm Tanaz Marine from Assam. And let me start by telling you a little bit about my state. Now, in Assam, we have a neo Vaishnavite religion called Nova Vaishnav Dharma. And it is a simple and accessible religion, a variation of Hinduism, which attracted already Hindu as well as non-Hindu populations. It was propounded by Shankardev somewhere in the 15th century. Now, this religion, it doesn't believe in idol worship. So, a lot of my neighbors belong to this religion, and they used to pray to a simple structure that was like Asaik, and they used to pray to a simple structure called the Namghar. Now, growing up as a Muslim kid, I have a lot of interesting experiences with this. Now, when I was around 8 and was starting to read the Quran Sharif for the first time. Now, it's a big deal in Islam if a child is starting the Quran. Like people are invited, prayers are recited, grandmothers overstuff you with food, like all of that, and the whole deal. But when the time came for me to start reciting the Quran, I was nowhere to be found. They couldn't find me anywhere. I was a troubled child, you can ask my father. But they couldn't find me anywhere. And after an entire search party went berserk, they found me in the neighbor's Namghar praying to Nava Vaishnavite gods so that my Quran goes well. So that is the environment that I grew up in. And to come to Delhi after that, and be denied houses on rent because they don't accept Mohammedans is a jarring experience. And when I talked about it on Twitter, I refuse to call it X on principle. A trigger warning here for hate speech, just letting everyone know. When I talked about it on Twitter, I was met with, Ghar chahiye? Then stop behaving like vagabonds and arsonists every time someone criticizes you. Jahan jaate ho, kasai mohalla bana dete ho. Stop doing love jihad, bombing, knifing, and on pretext of victimhood, even after snatching Pakistan, Bangladesh, killing Kashmiri Hindus. Then we will rent out. By the way, I am also a meat-eating Bengali, but I don't complain on not being given rent. Jiska ghar, uska ghar. So, after that grim note, we have to know that intersectionality in Northeast India, it is a complex framework. And that acknowledges the interconnected nature of various social identities, right? And their impact on individual experiences has to be acknowledged. So, the region, known for its diverse ethnicities, cultures, histories, presents a unique intersectional disciplines. And my experience while working with the queer community in the Northeast shows me that hatred and prejudice is a learned narrative. And kindness is inherent in human beings, unfortunately, as much as people at the top would not like us to believe. It is, however, very unfortunate that we are stuck in the binaries of what is the default and what is political. Because what are the genders? Male and political. What are the religions in India? Hinduism and political. What are the sexuality? Heterosexual and political. Joshua, back me up here. What are the regions in India? The north and so our clothes, our food, our gender expression, our speech, all of it is immensely political. And my experience tells me that shying away from it is not the way to go. For there to be equitable representation, there needs to be equitable opportunity. And we cannot achieve that without an intersectional form of social activism and advocacy. So I hope that answers that.
Absolutely, it does, and wonderfully so, Tanaz. Okay, Joshua, coming back to you. I love that so much. Now, now that we have heard so much about advocacies, lived experiences, etc., from our peers, and running advocacy spaces that all of us are doing in our own capacities, we have also highlighted how different contexts come into play, right? Like, we are all existing in our little communities, trying to do a little bit more for our community within our context, within our limited reach. And you have worked both in Malaysia and India with communities of young people. Now, it's a very interesting context because we are dealing with two very different kinds of countries when it comes to legal and political atmosphere, right? So now, how do these contexts of queer disabled experiences have differed from one another for in your experiences, and in what ways have you found them to be similar, if at all? And are there any community level best practices that us as Indians can learn from our peers in Malaysia?
Yeah, so interestingly, Malaysia was a place where I learned how to articulate my own oppression, which is hilarious because I always saw myself as privileged my entire life. Only when I moved to Malaysia, I was like, oh my god, the fact that my Brahmin classmates would throw away their food if I touched it, that was casteism. The fact that, people would kind of shit on Christians, like, and I'd be like, oh yeah, we're pretty shitty. And I was like, damn, that was sort of like, and it was always UC Savarna people. I was like, oh, that is sort of, Christian erasure. The fact that most of the people who dominated queer spaces, who had access to language about oppression, about intersectionality, about what it's like to be someone who's marginalized, were all people who are upper caste, who had access to books, who had access to families who had that education. So a lot of the thinkers and the left-wing people turned out to be UC Savarna people. And I was often like stumbling around, like, what is happening, what y'all talking about? Like, nobody ever, like, as an autistic person, I'm just always like oblivious to things. I just take everything at face value. So when people kind of counted me in as one of them, I was like, oh yeah, I am one of you, I guess. And then the more I became aware of the differences, the more confused I was because it didn't kind of connect. So being in Malaysia as very, like, obviously not part of the majority, So as someone who's an Indian, someone who's a Christian, someone who is, from a different country that Malaysians look down on, I was like, yeah, okay, fine. I'm used to being queer and oppressed, so I can handle this. But being there around people in the community there who actively acknowledge and articulate, the different intersections of oppression was like, I was like, oh my God, I am more oppressed than I thought I was. I was sort of escaped because of my class privilege. And then I look back at all my experience and the violences my family has gone through, the fact that we had to flee the country at one point in my childhood to escape persecution in the north, and then spend most of my childhood in South India to avoid the persecution. I was like, damn, we didn't escape. We've been persecuted. So I think the difference is that in Malaysia, because the divides are so clear, there has to be a lot more work done. Like there's racial and ethnic and religious sort of divides in how the country sort of exists in all the groups. And so in the queer community spaces also, that can come into the picture. But the thing about Malaysia is also what's interesting is because it's a Muslim majority country, queer people who are Muslim are more vulnerable under law because Sharia law applies to them, but not to others. So if you're queer and you're a Muslim, you can be prosecuted, you can be imprisoned. But if you're Chinese and queer, you're Indian and queer, they're just like, y'all do whatever you want. It's not our issue. So interestingly, the people who end up having visibility and who are able to lead the communities end up being from minority groups. And that kind of changes also the ways in which these groups are run, because these are groups who are used to not having power, to being disenfranchised, who now in a smaller setting have to navigate these sort of interplays of power and have more access to resources, more access to all of these things. So even there, obviously, like the Chinese queers tend to dominate and the Indians were just like, what about us? But it's kind of interesting to see how in a context, in a situation like that, the emphasis on intersectionality becomes so much more evident. And the community sort of oriented approach is so much more powerful. Because in India, what we can take for granted is access to communities, even when before 377 was struck down. It wasn't as bad, maybe, as over there, where there's like raids conducted regularly, there's imprisonment, there's like a lot of things that are happening. So people really are alienated from community. So when the communities come together, it's very sort of, supportive, it's very inclusive, it's very like taking into account a wide variety of needs. So over here, I think a lot of the community is very cis-gay dominated, unfortunately. UC Savannah cis-gay dominated. All of the above intersections. But over there, because a lot of people who seek the community are people who also don't have access to resources. There's a lot of pooling and sharing of resources. There's a lot of community dinners where people cook together, eat together. There's a community space where people come and spend time. They co-work, they support each other. They kind of like, we have support groups and meetings, and we have like, performances and art sort of sharing and like board game nights. And it's kind of like the space is for everyone to access. And even though there are different subgroups, nobody is like competing with each other for resources. There's a lot of mutual collaboration and support across different identities, across different linguistic groups, across sort of different sort of maybe even sub communities in the queer community. So I think those are things that I feel like I've taken back with me from there, and realized that the reason why I've never felt really included in the community is because I've not been around people who understood me or who were like me, who are like able to understand my oppression. People will just take for granted, oh, you have the same privileges as me. I'm like, but I don't. Like coming to Delhi, sorry, I'll finish. Like, even talking about housing, like when my parents moved to Delhi, everywhere they got rejected because they work for the church. And I was just like, oh, yeah, it's real. The oppression is real. It's just like nobody's given me the words to articulate it before. So I think that was something I think that has shaped also the ways in which we run the space here in India. So yes.
Thank you so much for that, Joshua. I mean, for a lot of us who come from these privileged backgrounds, we don't really realize that getting a house in Delhi can be a sign of our privilege, right? And not being denied housing based on our religion, caste, the way we look, what our name is, etc. It's something that I definitely didn't realize until much later, when being a single woman with cats for some reason became a reason why I was being denied housing in Delhi. So yeah, moving on to Shreyas, Joshua talked a lot about different contexts within India and Malaysia. and how their experiences have been shaped because of these different contexts. Um, I would just like to understand a little bit more about your lived experiences, given that you are from Delhi originally and you have worked in Bhopal, and you have also at times noted how you found a community for yourself in Bhopal that was affirming and that was a space for you. Now, could you tell us a little bit more about your experiences in Bhopal, which is relatively smaller than Delhi, whereas Delhi has a lot more resources and organizations working in queer disabled space, but can also be quite isolating for marginalized identities?
Yeah, thanks, Ayushmita. I think as I did not face a lot of issues with housing with the okay, I did with flatmates. That's a different conversation. With getting a house because I fortunately and luckily rather belong to an upper class, an upper caste and a religious majority. Um, but when I was about to take a flat with a person who actually does belong to a Muslim background, it became very difficult. And for me, considering that I was working in Bhopal and all of my friends were from my organization only, and for me, community just looked like having queer joy, putting on nail paints inside the office, and of course, the credit goes to my office also to make a space make a safe space for that. Of course, there were things that were problematic in my office, but what I would say is that even if um, uh, at least they made a space for me where I could wear whatever I want, do whatever I want, express myself the way I want to, without the fear of other team members. Um, and one thing that I also wanted to bring into this discourse is about, fatness. About I think since last week I was in fact in Bhopal to see an addiction specialist. I do suffer from food addiction and over dependency on food, and sometimes it's not always in my control to what I eat, how much I eat. So there was this very interesting game that one of our senior project coordinators started initiated in a farewell, and they asked who is the person who eats most of the food or eats leftovers or something like that. I'm not very sure what language did he use, and my name came up, and I was like, why did I take those cheesy fries? So after that, I actually started to give Domino's pizzas to people. uh, so my point being that spaces also need to be safe for fat people, because we also face so much of alienation in our own homes, and our workplaces should not remind us of that. And especially comments on okay, you became so fat, okay, you became so slim, and you should not wear this, you should not wear that, especially when we are meeting somebody around after a few minutes, after a few days or months. And uh, one thing that I also wanted to say was, in I cannot unfortunately speak a lot about my experience in Bhopal, but I would like to open this question to other people who belong to who have worked in tier 2 cities. But my experience as a person who is Hindu, who has a Sukhija surname, I was able to access some queer spaces in Bhopal, and that was because I had this and probably my surname, my access to language, my access to money may have played a role, because in Bhopal there are so many less spaces. The spaces are so less, but whereas in Delhi there are so many. There are a lot of spaces. Of course, there is a dearth in general, but there are a lot of spaces that it sometimes it becomes overstimulating, and we don't know where to go, who to associate with. Whereas in Bhopal, the spaces are so less, uh, but there is some sort of unanimity in the experiences, and bonding becomes easier. So that is definitely there. And thank you.
Thank you so much for
Okay,
sharing that.
one point that I wanted to add was that since I have a minute, uh, uh, a lot of community also meant was how colleagues used to how us and our colleagues used to just come up and cook together and eat and also provide a space where we could comfort us when we are having a bad day at our workplace. I remember when we were having a meeting at when we were having a meeting and I got shouted at by one of my colleagues, and I did become very sad. And seeing the message of one of my supervisor comforting me, that was very, very nice. And with that point, I just wanted to say that people from organizations should realize that when they are hiring queer and disabled people, they do come they do come with chronic illnesses, with anxiety. And I have overdosed on amphetamine so many times, and so that I can perform better. And there has also been, I only started anxiety meds when I started working in my previous organization, because of various things. And they should realize and be cognizant of this fact.
Thank you for sharing all of that, Shreyas, because it's not fun when our lived realities becomes jokes inside a conference room at our workplaces, right? It's really not fun. I remember, so I always pull down the shades when I walk into my office because it's too bright for me and I can't work. And this one time we were in a team call and I was doing that, and the founder just said, it's like clockwork. Aishmita always pulls it down, and everybody laughed that, oh, it's probably a habit or a trait, something which is very eccentric about me. It's not. It's because I'm neurodivergent. And if only she had ever asked me why is it that you need this accommodation, it would have been so much clearer for her, right? But anyway, we've been talking about experiences in the organizations where we work, etc. So we cannot really ignore or not talk about the elephant in the room now, can we? We've been hearing about diversity, equity, and inclusion as another buzzword, right? It's all over LinkedIn, everywhere. And Jasmine, I would like to get to know some of your thoughts, on this particular issue. In your experience working within the DEI space, how have queer disabled narratives found or not so much found its place, and what it really deserves within the industry?
Since we are talking about DEI, I must say I'm a disruptive DEI professional. Wherever I go, in school because of hyperactivity mostly, but at work because I can't leave my lived experiences behind when I do the work of DEI. There are not many neuroqueer, disabled DEI professionals, especially from Global South. If you wanted to connect with people, actually, I've tried because when I started working in this space, it was not intentional. I really wanted to make my career in gender and sexuality at the intersections of technology or disability, something like that, which was mainstream on LinkedIn at the time going on, I thought. But working for the finest names in the development space in human rights, you still see casteism and classist experiences that comes along as a professional. The programmatic work is so much focused on the charity-based lens that when you're working for prevention of sexual harassment or women's rights campaign, you always look for giving it to the beneficiaries, and that becomes a center conversation. Even though you are yourself like coming from that kind of experience, it's almost sidelined. I think uh, even the DEI models that are there at the time that we are trying to use, and the founders and leaders are trying to reach out to, are very corporate based, profit based models, which has a lot of commercial penetration uh, to it, I would say. And when we bring our lived experiences and try to design those kind of strategies, first of all, I was never given an explicit title of DEI work. It was my personality that shaped the role of itself because of my lived experiences. So now the struggle is to push it to a level where these strategies are not designed in the isolation within the organizations, but it becomes open source. It's very important that the accessibility protocols that feminists talk about globally, that I mean, how to say this, I think the that itself has to be designed in collaboration outside, even though it is going to be internally applied. So I think right now it took me 1 year, for example, to kind of just to bring people around from the development space, because talking to the professionals in the profit-based companies did not like really help. And bringing about the narratives, I think when you walk into the decision making room with the leaders and जो रोज़मर्रा के आपके नेगोशिएशन है जिस तरीके के, वो एक डिसीजन मेकिंग टेबल पे बहुत ज़्यादा साइडलाइन हो जाते हैं, क्योंकि वो चाहते हैं कि आप एक बहुत होपफुल और एक बहुत ऐसे चेंज वाले आइडिया को लेकर टेबल पर आए, वरना आप एक बहुत अपने आप में रिबेलियन वैसे ही देखे जाते हो, और हो सकता है कि आप एक बहुत डिसरप्टिव प्रोफेशनल हो. तो मेरी तो वो रेपुटेशन है ही, मुझे लगता है, क्योंकि रिसेंटली ऐसा हुआ था कि जहाँ पे डिसेबिलिटी की बात हो रही है एक ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में, डिसेबिलिटी इंक्लूजन पॉलिसी और स्ट्रेटजी बनाने की बात हो रही है, वैसे ही स्पेसेस में मैं लोगों से मिलने की कोशिश कर रही थी, और उसी स्पेस में मैंने एक डिसेबिलिटी एलाय को एक वर्कशॉप लेते हुए देखा, और मैं सामने ही बैठी थी और उन्हें पता था कि मैं डिसेबल्ड हूँ. और मेरी क्वेयर आइडेंटिटी तो मैं बात ही नहीं कर पाती हूँ, क्योंकि यहीं तक मैं रह जाती हूँ. मुझे लगता है कि वो इंटरसेक्शन एक तरीके की आइडेंटिटी को ही जद्दोजहद लगी है कि वो ही कोई समझ ले तो मैं अपनी दूसरे इंटरसेक्शन की बात कर पाऊँ कभी कभी, क्योंकि वो ज़्यादा डोमिनेंट है मेरे लाइफ में. तो मुझे लगता है कि जब इस तरीके के सवाल आते हैं तो मेरे नैरेटिव्स को साइडलाइन हो जाना बहुत आसान है. एक सिस हेटेरोसेक्सुअल DEI प्रोफेशनल जब जेनोफोबिया को सवाल करता है तो वो उतना डिसरप्टिव नहीं होता जब मैं एक एक्सेसिबिलिटी रिक्वायरमेंट की को चैलेंज करती हूँ, जितनी मैं डिसरप्टिव होती हूँ इस स्पेस में. जस्ट टू एक और थोड़ा ऐड करना चाहती थी कि अगर हम DEI जैसे अपने ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में रोल मॉडल करना चाहते हैं, हम जिन लोगों को जिस तरीके से हम ये रोल मॉडल करना भी चाहते हैं ऐसे रोल्स, लेकिन क्या सिर्फ रिकॉग्नाइज करना कि एक्सेसिबिलिटी रिक्वायरमेंट्स है या वो अकोमोडेशंस हम रिकॉग्नाइज कर रहे हैं कि इसकी ज़रूरत है, पर जैसे श्रेयस ने कहा कि या सिर्फ या उसे किस तरीके से आप उसका एक सिस्टम बना रहे हैं जो हम लोग वहाँ पर आने के बाद वो जी सकते हैं, अपने थ्राइव कर सकते हैं हमारी उस एक्सपीरियंसेस में. आई थिंक वो ज़्यादा ज़रूरी है कि सिर्फ एक्सेसिबिलिटी या इक्विटी की ही बात नहीं की जाए. ये लेंस जब लीडर्स उसे डिसेबिलिटी और जस्टिस और लिबरेशन के लेंस से देखते हैं, इसका मतलब है कि सिर्फ एक्सेसिबिलिटी ही नहीं, एक्सेसिबिलिटी होने के बाद भी एक रूम में अगर आप हो तब भी एक गेज जो है कि आप एक क्वेयर एक डिसेबल्ड पर्सन को इनविजिबलाइज करके एक एलाई को रिकॉग्नाइज कर पा रहे हैं फिर भी उस स्पेस में, तो समझ आता है कि कितना ज़रूरी है कि इसे डिसेबिलिटी जस्टिस का लेंस लेना है, ना कि बस एक्सेसिबिलिटी के नज़रिए से.
You know, absolutely. I think some of the things that Jasmine has talked about is very interesting, and quickly summarizing the few points that they shared in Hindi, and I will not be able to do justice to what they have said. I'll clarify that. You know, sometimes it becomes very difficult for them and a lot of us also to talk about the intersectional identities that we are a part of. It can be sometimes one of our identities take the center stage, such as our disability may take the center stage, and we do not find the space that the acknowledgement of our queerness, because sometimes it's more and in their own words, it's more comfortable for an upper caste white person to talk about xenophobia than it is for a Muslim disabled person like them to talk about disability and accessibility needs. Another important thing that they brought up was how it is important to center lived experiences within the DEI space. And it is important for us to bring about social justice and liberty into DEI rather than looking at it from a strictly commercial or a corporate lens, which is not doing its job. And even as individuals who may be within the DEI space with various lived experiences and intersectional identities, there's always this lens, this gaze of invisibilization, because it's easier for an ally to become the speaker rather than people with lived experiences, right? And this is so interesting what Jasmine talked about, because a couple weeks back, I remembered looking at a lineup of panelists on a disability panel, and everybody was a able-bodied person. I will not name the organization or the panel, but everybody was in it. And I hate making this assumption that everybody was, which is why I also looked them up, tried to see that have they ever said anything about their lived experiences. It was very uncomfortable for me because I didn't even want to make that claim that everybody is able-bodied, because it would be terrible of me to assume, but their profiles didn't reveal anything about that. So that's also happening, right? We have moved on from manels to panels on disability being headed by able-bodied people, right? So it's messed up. It's messed up, and I think it's as much as we are able to do as much as everyone else is comfortable with. And I think what Jasmine does, they talked about being disruptive, etc. I think we have to be disruptive, else nothing. Otherwise, nothing else will happen. I'm sorry I went on a tangent, but coming back to Shivani. Shivani, hi. Are you there?
Yes, I'm aware.
Awesome. Something that I've been quite excited to ask you, because you are quite uniquely positioned to give a take on this. These days we witness a lot of good happening through online mediums, but we also talked about this in the previous panel discussion about the immense hate speech and doxing that a lot of queer disabled individuals face, especially because of the activism route that some of us take. And now, since you work extensively in the online space and have built a community for yourself and others in the online spaces, how do you think our online communities can come together and help each other, from doxing and hate? Of course, there's AI, but how can we come together as a community also?
So I think with respect to hate and doxing online, uh, it is yes obviously very prevalent because of all the issues that we know. One way that communities can come together is being a platform for resources. I am myself, as I told you, when initially I was very vocal and I would say radical about my viewpoints on online spaces, and now I have toned down so much because of the hate that I was receiving, and they were like a it was culminating in a lot of violent ways as well. So, as community spaces, when I was in a crisis situation, and the things which actually, provided me some respite was thankfully because I was part of also community spaces which had legal experts as well. So they could help me with providing because back then I was just out of law school and I did not have practical experiences regarding this. So those people could give me, very practical ways of how, first of all, I should, focus on my physical safety. if I'm filing an FIR or a complaint regarding this online harassment, I should be sure that I do not give them my address, because being a queer person, I might not be open to my family, right? So I would not want to want the police to come to my house that okay, I was I was harassed online because of my queer identity or something I said on queerness. So I got these resources through these online communities. First is this is just an example, then especially then second is the support that we can get. One is for the practical resources, and secondly for the support, because in a crisis is a situation, obviously we need, sometimes we might even need expert support if we are part of communities, or there are community spaces which also have mental health experts. They might be able to provide us professional help. And apart from that, because I think in online spaces, what I am very happy about and very thankful to Joshua also, because I'm also a part of the ADHD People group. So all these peer support practices and groups which are there. So it's not just the professional help that is required, but being a part of community, knowing that there is someone who understands what we are struggling, other people sharing their similar lived experiences which are there, because sometimes all this hate which comes to us, sometimes we start believing what these people are saying, whatever they say. If we do not share our experience with the people, it is possible that it might also influence us, and what their reason for hate is, they actually achieve that motive. But through these community spaces, we also get this a platform to gain acceptance. And yes, and obviously if there is something else, then people can come together, and beyond online spaces also people can provide other resources.
Thank you so much, Shivani, for that answer. You know, of course, we are towards the end of our discussion, but I have a very important question for Tanaz, which I personally really would like some insights on, because Tanaz, you have successfully been working in building community spaces around yourself within Guwahati, and I personally have not been able to do that. I mean, I don't have my parents coming to these events; they never will. But there's something that either I am doing wrong, or or you have done wonderfully. Either way, I would really like to understand your experiences of building this community in Guwahati, and what can we learn from your experiences and the community that you have built around yourself, and so that we can scale it up, in our small spaces, and hopefully take it to the national level.
You can learn how to wing an eyeliner from me if you want to, but you're doing it wonderfully anyway. To quote a great academician in this gathering of August scholars, Spider-Man's Uncle Ben said, with great power comes great responsibility, right? So, as Northeastern people with great skin and metabolism comes great racism and exclusion. And as a queer Muslim woman, it is instrumental. Intersectionality is instrumental in understanding mine and my people's identities. So, the queer community in Northeast India is infallibly and abjectly human. So, in that sense, it is extremely flawed. As queer visibility and acceptance continues to grow in India, so does the representation of queerness in the Northeastern landscape. In reference to Northeast India, I can say that the indigenous cultures and contemporary queer activism is witnessing a gradual shift in attitudes towards queerness. However, there are many challenges, right? So the first would be the lack of legal protections. And I do not mean just queer marriage. Please. Second being social stigma that we are unfortunately all too familiar with. Third being the language barrier. We do not speak Hindi. Many of us don't speak English. There is not an Assamese equivalent for pansexual. There is not a Meitei equivalent for aromantic. So here I would also introduce a fourth challenge, which is the concept of the glass closet. Yes. The glass closet is something that we use a lot in Northeastern activism, which means that you're not exactly closeted. People can see that you're not closeted from a mile away, but at the same time, you can never come out. So you are in a glass closet. People know, but you can never address it. And this is a massive queer elephant in the room. So there is nothing you can do about it. You just live your life in a glass closet. You get married, you have kids, your wife knows you're gay, but they don't do anything about it. You get married with somebody you're not attracted to. You have kids that you cannot encourage to be themselves. So you live your lives living in a glass closet in Northeast India and so many other places in the world. So the glass closet is very important in intersectional advocacy effort for queer individuals in India. So in Northeast India, how does advocacy for queer individuals come to play with intersectionality? Right? So what needs to be done is first acknowledging this diversity. We need to know that there is a different ethnicity and different language every 5 kilometers in Northeast India. And by the way, Assamese in Northeast India is extremely inclusive. Assamese, Assamese people, when we speak Hindi, we are extremely inclusive. Our Assamese people speak Hindi in a non-binary manner, in the sense कि लड़की कपड़ा पहनता है. Okay. So how does advocacy for queer individuals come to play? What needs to be done is first acknowledging this diversity. Second is addressing these multiple needs. Third is promoting this inclusivity. A lot of inclusivity efforts are being done, but not a lot of promotion is being done of it. We don't know how to market, unfortunately. We're great human beings, marketers, not much. So we need to know how to push our efforts. And fourth is collaborations across movements, that Ankur very beautifully said in the last panel. So in Northeast India, queer advocacy embraces intersectionality and is essential for creating meaningful, quantifiable change. Please know that our qualifiable emotions, they need to be converted to quantifiable change, because there's nothing we can do with emotions alone. Very important, but not enough alone. By addressing and understanding the unique intersections of queerness, advocacy efforts can be more inclusive, effective, and empowering for queer individuals in the region and eventually, as you asked, countrywide as well. So to overcome all of this, we need to remember that the challenges persist, but so do we. And so many queer lives, so many neurodivergent lives, so many disabled lives, they have to be explored, they have to be studied, they have to be lived. Hence, I believe that all of this contributes to its dialogue around disability and queerness in general, shedding light to often overlooked intersections of these identities, and that can be done mostly through intersectional advocacy. So yeah, that's about it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much all five of you for this wonderful discussion, for the incredible insights that you have shared with us, for being kind enough to share your stories, lived experiences with all of us here. And I am personally indebted to all five of you for taking the time to engage with me, reply to my emails. Even last night, which was quite late. But I'm sure it has been a wonderful experience for all of us. Unfortunately, we don't have time. Okay.
So I think it's from Himanshi. Just a second. This is for Jasmine. Hi, Jasmine. This is, I think, from Himanshi, my mentor from Oxfam. So she asks, I have a question for Jasmine. How has it been to work with big INGO? Plus, what is required from big non-profits to make their spaces more inclusive?
I think international NGOs had an experience with international NGO working in India and Canada, both. So I'll speak for two different settings and cultures as well. Um, First of all, I think
Please hire people for their lived experiences. Don't hire them from foreign universities and elite institutions. Please, please. Don't make us write good English in our cover letters. We want to work with you. We have experience. I think I was hired with international NGO on a metro station. I'm not kidding. I met a campaigner, a frontline fundraiser at the Bombay metro station. I I was just walking down and they were talking about that day I got to know feminist. There is a word called feminist or feminism. So and the person who hired me was a trans woman, believed in me for my broken English. A jobless, trying to do internship with at the time in Bombay, and really believed in me. So I think please make these spaces uh, more uh, more open to the girls and women and queer people from the rural areas. Reach there through local newspapers if possible, or regional languages, because they are ready to work, they want to work. Please, in fact, the global representation in the international NGOs, I think even there, maybe if there are interpreters, translators, if possible, if they can fund this or shift this through funding, then maybe we can also take global jobs. I know this is quite aspirational. This sounds aspirational, I know, but it's possible to begin with there and then train us for the languages that are required. So I think these are some of the starting points to get us inside the organization. But then the experiences of working with these spaces are really casteist and classist, to say, so to speak, and the marginalization within the organizations is real. And when I say real, that is the English I know, I'm sorry, but I think, and that needs to be challenged by the senior leaders. And please get your board members with the representations that you're working for. We want the board members to look like our experiences, not just some, I don't know.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jasmine. Yeah, over to you, Ayushmita, for the closing.
I'm sorry we don't have time for audience questions, but I'm sure all our speakers are kind enough to be connected to all of you on LinkedIn, email. I know I would encourage that for Shivani for sure, because we wouldn't want Shivani to feel excluded, just because they're not here. It was a wonderful conversation with all five of you. It was awesome to have an audience that was listening to us with such great attention and kindness. Thank you to Soumya and Shafali for inviting me and all of us here, for giving us the space. And thank you to all five of you for giving your time, energy, and I'll definitely reach out to you for the Wing 99. Thank you.
Thank you for this lovely roundtable on where we understood the importance of persisting in challenges that we all have, and also learning how to do a great winged eyeliner. I will summarize the roundtable very briefly, and then I will ask Shafali to facilitate the roundtable speakers, and then we can move on to the last part of the today's event. We emphasized on the importance of neurodivergence, intersectional oppression, and the leadership of communities by those who belong to them. We also highlighted the exclusion in feminist spaces, advocating for the real meaning of universal policies, and challenges that currently surround the corporate DEI models. We also delved into post-affirmative action in hiring, the intersection of religion and workplaces, and the need for budgeted training and research processes. We discussed online and offline advocacy, the impact of digital platforms, and the importance of sensitivity to intersectionalities. We also explored the complexities of intersectionality in Northeast India, emphasizing the political nature of gender, food, and as a whole, our whole existence. Together, these narratives underscore the importance of inclusivity, collaboration, and ongoing efforts in the face of persistent challenges.